The lawyer pushed one envelope toward Daniel and a county map toward Mara. "Your mother left Bellwether Farm to Daniel," he said. "The house, barns, equipment, livestock, and all acreage contained in the main tract." Daniel stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. Mara waited. There had to be another sentence. Mr. Vale adjusted his glasses. "Mara, she left you the road. The road. Bellwether Road. From the county pavement to the farm gate. Approximately 1.5 miles, including the drainage shoulders, culverts, and the old produce shelter at the southern entrance." Mara looked down at the map. A narrow yellow strip ran toward the broad green shape Daniel had inherited. It looked like an arrow pointing at everything she had not been given. Mr. Vale cleared his throat. "Your mother included a personal explanation." Daniel's eyes closed briefly. The lawyer read, "Daniel gave his life to the farm. Mara was always looking for the road out. I have tried to provide for them according to the lives they chose." For 3 years, Mara had washed her mother's hair over the kitchen sink because Celia Bell could no longer lift her arms. She had counted pills, changed sheets, and slept with her bedroom door open so she could hear the oxygen machine alarm. Why had her mother saved her sharpest sentence for when Mara could no longer answer it? The office clock ticked above a framed photograph of Mr. Vale, shaking hands with a governor nobody liked anymore. Rain tapped the windows. Mara could smell the peppermint in the lawyer's mouth every time he breathed. Daniel finally said, "That can't be all." Mr. Vale's glasses flashed toward him. "It is the full disposition of the real property." "No, I mean for her." "I understood what you meant." Mara folded the map along a line that did not exist, running straight through Daniel's farmhouse. "Careful," Mr. Vale said. "That's the survey copy. I'd hate to damage my road." Neither man laughed. 3 days earlier, Bellwether Farm had been full of people carrying casseroles. The funeral had taken place beneath a white sky that could not decide whether to snow. By afternoon, the kitchen counters held 7 kinds of potatoes and enough baked ham to preserve Daniel and Mara until Easter. Ruth Alvarez had hugged Mara beside the sink and whispered, "You look worn clean through." "I'm going for a transparent look." Ruth pulled back, still holding her shoulders. She was 62, square-built, with silver hair clipped close to her head, and the deep calm of someone who regularly handled thousands of bees. "You call me," she said. "For what?" "For when you find out." Mara had thought Ruth meant when the grief arrived. Grief had been behaving strangely. It hid while Mara was choosing the dress her mother would be buried in, then struck because someone put Celia's favorite wooden spoon in the dishwasher. It ignored the hymns and attacked in the grocery aisle when Mara reached automatically for the soft peppermints her mother liked. Now she wondered if Ruth had meant the will. Mr. Vale turned the survey map around and touched the yellow strip with one square fingernail. "The road is a separate parcel created by your grandfather in 1968. Daniel's property has permanent access. So do the Alvarez parcel, the Pike Workshop, and 2 other tracts along the lower section. You cannot obstruct their use." Mara looked up. "I wasn't planning to install a drawbridge. I'm explaining the terms." "Does the drawbridge come out of my share?" Mr. Vale removed his hand from the map. "Routine maintenance and property taxes are your responsibility. Damage resulting from ordinary weather is generally included in that maintenance." Daniel shifted in his chair. "What's the road worth?" "Not much by itself." There it was, not much by itself. Mara's mother had owned a pearl ring, a cedar chest, and 6 porcelain birds that had spent 30 years watching everyone eat breakfast. Any one of those would have been easier to understand. Instead, Celia had reached from her grave and handed her daughter every pothole leading to her son. "Did she write that line recently?" Mara asked. Mr. Vale glanced at the page. The statement accompanied the will when it was revised 14 months ago. 14 months ago, Mara had been living at the farm full-time. She had given up her rented room over the pharmacy after her mother fell in the bathroom and lay there for 4 hours because Daniel was checking fence on the North Ridge and had left his phone in the truck. Mara had gone from paying rent to buying groceries for the farmhouse. Her motel paycheck shrank when she cut her night shifts. Her savings disappeared in $20 withdrawals that never seemed worth mentioning. 14 months ago, her mother had watched all of that and written road out. Daniel opened his envelope. The brass farmhouse keys slid onto the polished table between them. Their father's red plastic tag was still attached, Bellwether, stamped across it in fading black ink. Daniel put his palm over the keys. It was a small movement. He might have been stopping them from falling. Mara hated him for it anyway. Outside, the rain had sharpened. Daniel drove them home in their mother's Buick because Mara's pickup had begun making a grinding noise whenever she turned left. He kept both hands at 10 and 2, though he had spent 20 years driving tractors one-handed across hills steep enough to make sensible people pray. They turned off the county pavement onto Bellwether Road. Water ran milk-brown through the ditches. The gravel had thinned near the first curve, exposing 2 dark ribs of clay. "Culvert's backing up," Mara said. Daniel glanced toward it. "I see it. You'll want to clear the mouth before tonight." He gave her a tired look. "Apparently, you'll want to clear it." Mara turned toward the window. The old produce shelter stood near the entrance, leaning into a patch of blackberry canes. Its tin roof had lifted at one corner. When she was young, her mother had called it the stand, though nobody had sold anything there in years. Celia stored empty feed sacks inside until mice chewed the bottoms out of them. "Sorry," Daniel said after they passed it. "For which part?" "That came out wrong." It came out accurate. At the farmhouse, he carried the casserole someone had sent home from Mr. Vale's office. Mara carried the map. Daniel unlocked the front door with his new key, even though it had not been locked when they left. The click sounded indecently loud. For the next 2 days, they moved around each other with funeral politeness. Mara answered messages from relatives, returned the borrowed folding chairs, and packed her mother's medical supplies into boxes for donation. Daniel walked the farm with a legal pad, writing down equipment model numbers and stopping in doorways as if he had been appointed inspector of a country that had survived without him. At breakfast Thursday, he announced that the lower pasture fencing would have to be replaced. Mara poured coffee into the blue mug her mother had used every morning. "That fence has leaned since Clinton. It's worse now. It's more experienced." Daniel did not smile. He had their father's heavy brow and their mother's narrow, careful hands. At 34, he already carried himself like a man posing for a bronze statue titled Endurance. "I'm meeting an agricultural consultant next week," he said. "We need to assess the whole operation. The farm, right?" He rubbed his thumb along the edge of his legal pad. "Mr. Vale is preparing a simple transfer for the road." Mara stopped with the coffee halfway to her mouth. "A transfer to who?" "To the farm." "To me, technically, but it puts the property back together. Grandpa never should have separated it, so Mom's final wish lasted 48 hours. Mara, she went to considerable trouble to give me those ditches. I'm trying to make this easier. For you. For both of us. What are you going to do with a road?" She looked past him through the kitchen window. Beyond the glass, the equipment barn sat in the weak morning sun. She had painted its doors the summer she turned 23, during one of the stretches Daniel later described as her being gone. "I haven't decided. There's nothing to decide. It serves the farm. It serves Ruth's place. Amos's shop. They have access. That doesn't mean you need to own it. What do I need to own?" Daniel leaned back. For a moment, something frightened crossed his face. Then it closed. "I didn't write the will. No. You just put your hand over the keys." His chair scraped the floor. He left without finishing his coffee. Through the window, Mara watched him cross the yard toward the main barn, shoulders hunched against weather that was no longer there. On Friday, she drove to the motel for her first shift since the funeral. Her supervisor, Denise, stood with her beside the industrial washers and explained that 3 missed shifts were 3 missed shifts, even when somebody's mother died. "I can give you 2 nights a week," Denise said. "Maybe 3 when conferences pick up. I had 4. I know what you had." Steam dampened the loose hair around Mara's face. A dryer thumped behind them with the steady violence of a shoe trapped inside. "I told you I'd be gone, and I told you I'd do what I could." Mara nodded because Denise was not cruel. That almost made it worse. During her break, she checked her account balance, $11.42. Her truck needed a transmission. Her mother's Buick now belonged to Daniel, along with the farm vehicles. Mara owned a road she could not afford to repair, and enough gas to drive halfway down it. When she returned to Bellwether near midnight, Daniel was waiting in the kitchen. A typed document lay on the table. "I need an answer," he said. She did not take off her coat. "You stayed up for this?" "I stayed up because we can't keep circling each other. I've been folding sheets for 8 hours. I haven't had time to circle anybody." He tapped the document. "I'll cover the transfer cost. I'll cover the road taxes. You walk away clean." The phrase lodged under her ribs. "Walk away clean," she repeated. I didn't mean it like that. You keep saying that after you say exactly what you mean. Daniel's jaw tightened. The road is worthless to you. Then why are you in such a hurry? Because the farm needs to be one property. Because lenders and insurers don't like complications. Because I have enough to deal with without asking my sister's permission every time gravel washes downhill. You don't need my permission to use it. I need certainty. Mara looked at the signature line. Daniel's name was already typed beneath the space-marked Grantee. Hers waited under grantor, the person giving something away. What are you offering? She asked. His face changed just enough. You said it was worthless, she continued. So, I'm curious what worthless is going for. I thought taking the expense off your hands was the offer. She folded the document once, neatly, and slid it back. No. Daniel's voice went low. Don't make this a punishment. For whom? You think I don't know you're angry? I think Mom knew. He flinched. Mara was glad for half a second, then ashamed, then glad again. I have a consultant coming Monday, he said. I need your room cleared so we can use that side of the house as an office. She stared at him. My room. It's temporary. You inherited 12 rooms. I inherited a working farm, and I inherited the way to it. Neither of them moved. By Monday afternoon, Mara's duffel bag, work shoes, winter coat, and 3 cardboard boxes were stacked on the front porch. Daniel had covered them with a blue tarp because rain was expected. That was his surprising kindness. Mara stood beside her belongings while he watched from behind the screen door. Down past the barns and bare pear trees, Bellwether Road ran toward the highway, pale and rutted in hers. She took hold of the tarp. Then she began carrying everything downhill. The first box made it as far as the equipment barn before the bottom softened and dropped out. A pair of jeans, 2 motel uniforms, and Celia's old red cardigans spilled across the wet gravel. Mara crouched to gather them. The cardigan snagged on a stone. Behind her, the screen door opened. You can use the truck, Daniel called. Mara kept folding. At least let me drive your things down. She tucked the cardigan under her arm and rebuilt the box around the clothes. Mara, you needed the room cleared. It's cleared. That doesn't mean you have to put on a whole production. She turned then. Daniel stood on the porch with his hands braced against the doorframe, as if the farmhouse might move without him holding it still. I didn't invite an audience. He disappeared inside. A minute later, an engine started behind the barn. Mara expected the farm truck. Instead, Daniel drove the tractor into the north pasture and did not look at her when he passed. She made it another quarter mile before Amos Pike came rattling around the curve in a faded Ford pickup, with a welder bolted to the bed. He slowed beside her, rolled down the window, and examined the box in her arms. You lose a vehicle, temporarily, lose a fight, permanently. Amos had a long, weathered face and white eyebrows that appeared to be trying to leave it. He pushed open the passenger door. Get in. I'm fine. I can see that. You're carrying your underwear down a public-looking road at 4 in the afternoon. It isn't public. That makes it dignified, then. Mara put the box on the floorboard and climbed in. Amos's workshop sat on a small parcel near the lower bend, a low metal building surrounded by old machinery arranged with the care of cemetery stones. He had repaired bellwether equipment for as long as Mara could remember, usually while complaining that the Bell family treated grease as a personality flaw. He drove back for the rest of her belongings without asking permission. Daniel had gone inside by then. The tarp remained on the porch. Amos looked toward the windows. He throw you out? He needs an office. Farm changed a lot since breakfast? He has a consultant. Well, hell. Those take up space. Mara laughed before she could stop herself. It came out too loudly and broke in the middle. Amos pretended not to notice. He loaded the boxes, duffel, and shoes, then wedged the blue tarp behind the passenger seat. Where are we taking this? The stand. He turned his head slowly. The produce stand? It has a back room. It has raccoons. They can stay if they split utilities. The shelter looked worse with her belongings piled outside it. Blackberry canes had grown through the railing. The front counter sagged in the center, and one of the shutters hung from a single hinge. Someone had nailed a metal Bellwether Produce sign above the opening decades earlier. Rust had eaten the edges, leaving the name intact and most of produce gone. Amos shouldered the door. It resisted, then opened with the sticky sigh of something disappointed to be disturbed. The main room smelled of mouse droppings, old apples, and wet timber. Bundles of feed sacks leaned against one wall. 3 cracked bushel baskets hung from hooks. The back room held a narrow cot frame without a mattress, a broken chair, and several jars clouded with age. Mara stepped inside. "Cozy," Amos said. "It's bigger than the motel laundry office. So is my truck bed. You're not sleeping there either." He went to his workshop for a pry bar and came back with Ruth. Ruth entered carrying rubber gloves, bleach, a broom, and the expression of a woman arriving to settle an argument she had already won. "You called her?" Mara asked Amos. "I value my life." Ruth looked around the back room. "You're not staying here. I own it. You own Poison Ivy too. Ownership is not a recommendation. I don't have anywhere else." The bluntness silenced all 3 of them. Ruth set the bleach on the counter. "Then we start with the mice. They worked until dark." Amos cleared the blackberry canes from the door and replaced the missing shutter screw. Ruth swept while Mara dragged feed sacks outside, each one releasing dust and the occasional walnut shell. Beneath them, she found names written in black marker: Bell, Alvarez, Murphy, Grant. Some were so faded she had to tilt them toward the light. "What were these?" Mara asked. "Orders," Ruth said. "For feed? For whatever people were picking up. Flour, seed, apples. Your mother kept a list before everybody started driving into town for every little thing." "My mother?" Ruth did not look up from the floor. Back when she was still Celia Mercer and wore her hair down to her waist. Mara tried to picture it. Her mother had worn the same short practical cut for Mara's entire life, as though hair below the chin indicated poor planning. She ran the stand, helped run it. She never told me that. Celia stopped telling stories that didn't match the person she decided she was. Ruth said it without malice, which made it harder to dismiss. Amos found an old electrical line, but refused to turn it on until he inspected the wiring in daylight. Ruth brought a camp stove from her house, along with a foam mattress and 2 quilts. One smelled faintly of cedar. The other had a stain shaped like Ohio. "I'll pay you," Mara said. "With your $11? Mara stared at her. Ruth paused while spreading the quilt. "You said you had $11 at the lawyer's office." "I did not." "You told me at the funeral you were broke." "I said I was doing a transparent look." "Same thing on you." Amos barked a laugh from the front room. Mara felt heat climb her neck. "I don't want to be anybody's charity case." "Then don't be one. Help me lift the other end." Together, they shifted the cot away from a damp patch. Ruth did not hug her or tell her everything would be all right. She handed Mara the bleach and instructed her to wipe the windowsill again, because once had clearly been an emotional effort rather than a sanitary one. After they left, the shelter became painfully quiet. Mara heated canned soup on the camp stove. She ate sitting on the front counter with her boots resting on an overturned basket. Headlights passed on the county highway beyond the bare trees. Nobody turned onto Bellwether Road. From the shelter, she could not see the farmhouse. She could see the beginning of the lane, though, including the shallow ditch where rainwater moved around fallen leaves. The road looked less like property than a long chore. Her phone lit with a message from Daniel. "You left Mom's mug." Mara looked at the soup can in her hands. Which one? Blue. The one she had used at breakfast. The one Celia had used every morning before that. "Bring it down," Mara typed. 3 dots appeared, vanished, and appeared again. "I'll leave it in the kitchen." She set the phone face down. Rain began after midnight. Water pecked at the tin roof, finding 3 leaks Amos had not found in daylight. Mara put a jar beneath one and a saucepan beneath another. The third dripped onto the floor near her pillow, so she dragged the cot 6 inches toward the wall and listened to the shelter creak. She had nearly fallen asleep when headlights swept through the cracks in the shutter. A truck stopped outside. Daniel knocked once and entered before she answered. His coat was dark at the shoulders. He carried the blue mug wrapped in a dish towel. "You could have waited until morning," Mara said. "You said bring it down." "I didn't mean at 1 in the morning. You always say people should do things when they say they will. That has never worked on you before." He put the mug on the counter. His eyes moved over the camp stove, the jars catching rain, and the cot in the back room. A muscle worked in his cheek. "This is ridiculous. It's temporary. There are mice. We're negotiating. You can stay in the house another week. Your consultant might get lonely." I was angry. So was Mom. Look what she accomplished. Daniel flinched toward the road. Rain shone in the headlights of his truck. "The ditch is filling above Amos's," he said. Mara slid off the counter. They drove up the lane together without discussing whose responsibility it was. Near the lower bend, wet leaves had formed a dark mat over the mouth of a metal pipe. Water spread across half the road. Daniel handed her the rake from his truck bed. He took a shovel. For 20 minutes they worked in the rain, pulling leaves, sticks, and a drowned feed sack from the ditch. When the blockage gave, water punched through the pipe and rushed out the far side. Mara leaned on the rake, soaked through. Daniel wiped his mouth with his sleeve. "Dad used to clear this before every storm. I used to clear it with him. I did too, not this one." He looked at her. "You want a medal for knowing a culvert?" "No. I wanted half the farm." The rain made a hard curtain between them. Daniel turned away first. "You know what the debt is?" Mara's grip tightened on the rake. "On the farm," he said. "Do you know?" "No." "Neither did I." He threw the shovel into the truck bed. The clang rang against the trees. For 1 second, Mara almost asked how bad it was. Then she remembered the transfer paper with his name already waiting on it. "You inherited the books," she said, "and you inherited this." He pointed at the water racing harmlessly through the pipe. They drove back without speaking. At the shelter, Mara climbed out and shut the door harder than necessary. Daniel waited until she was inside before pulling away. By morning, the rain had stopped. The air smelled washed and raw. Mara walked the lower section with a rake over her shoulder, clearing branches and kicking loose gravel back into the ruts. At the county end, she stood beneath the rusted sign and looked up the long rise. She had spent years driving this road without noticing where the water wanted to go. Now, every slope seemed to make a demand. A silver SUV turned in and stopped beside her. The woman driving wore a cream raincoat and held a travel mug with both hands. "Bellwether Farm?" she asked through the open window. "End of the road. I'm looking for Daniel Bell. Still end of the road." The woman smiled uncertainly. "You must be Mara." That stopped her. Daniel said his sister owned the access parcel. "The road?" "Yes." "He make it sound like a rash?" The woman's smile became real. He made it sound complicated. "I'm Claire Benton, the consultant." Mara stepped aside. Claire drove on, tires hissing over wet gravel. At the first curve, her brake lights flashed where water had cut a fresh channel through the road. Mara watched the SUV climb toward everything Daniel owned. Then she noticed a low, steady rumble beneath the ordinary sounds of dripping trees. It came from farther uphill. She followed it past Amos's workshop, around the second bend, and stopped where the old stone culvert crossed below the lane. Muddy water boiled against its upstream wall. Branches shuddered in the opening, packed too deep to reach with a rake. The road surface above them had sagged into a shallow bowl. Mara took out her phone. Daniel answered on the fourth ring. "The stone culvert's backing up," she said. "I'm with Claire. The road is sinking." A crack opened across the gravel while she watched, thin at first, then widening with a soft, sickening crunch. On the far side, a section of road dropped 6 inches. Mara? Water burst through the stones. The center of Bellwether Road folded into the ditch and vanished. Mara jumped backward as brown water punched through the broken road. For a second, the gap was no wider than a grave. Then the upstream edge crumbled, taking gravel, clay, and a section of the stone wall with it. Water dragged the pieces downhill in a rolling gray churn. "Get away from it," Daniel said through the phone. She was already moving. An engine growled above the brake. Daniel's farm truck appeared around the bend and stopped hard. Claire's silver SUV pulled up behind him. Daniel got out without a coat and came toward the washout until Mara raised both hands. "Stay there. The edge is still going." He stopped 4 feet from it. They faced each other across 12 feet of muddy water. Claire climbed out, keeping well back. Her cream raincoat looked less impressive now, spattered to the knees. "Is there another way off the farm?" "No," Mara and Daniel answered together. Amos arrived on Mara's side in his pickup. He took one look, backed down to his workshop, and returned on foot carrying a steel bar. Without greeting anyone, he pushed the bar into the road near the remaining edge. Half its length disappeared into soft earth. "Don't put the truck over this," he called to Daniel. "I wasn't planning to. You were standing like a man planning something." Daniel glanced back at the vehicles trapped behind him. "Can it be patched today?" Amos looked into the water. "Sure, if today lasts until Thursday." Ruth came down from her apiary in rubber boots and an olive rain jacket. She stood beside Daniel, her hands tucked under her arms. "I have honey pickups this afternoon," she said. "I have a feed delivery at 6 tomorrow morning," Daniel replied. Mara stared at the missing road. Her road. The words had sounded ridiculous in Mr. Vale's office. They did not sound ridiculous now. "What do we need?" she asked Amos. "We need the rain to stop upstream. Then we dig out the old stone throat, lay pipe, rebuild the bed, and pack gravel. How much?" "If we use new pipe, enough to upset you." "I'm already upset." "Then you're prepared." Daniel called across. "The farm has an account at Mercer Supply." Mara looked at him. He added, "They'll deliver pipe. Will the farm pay for it?" His mouth tightened. This is exactly why the road should have stayed with the property. It did stay with property. Mine. Claire stepped closer to Daniel and said something Mara could not hear. He answered without turning. Claire's expression went still. Amos touched Mara's arm with 2 fingers. "Let's not negotiate in a flood." They walked back to his workshop, while Daniel, Ruth, and Claire returned uphill. Mara could feel Daniel's gaze between her shoulder blades. Inside the shop, Amos cleared a metal chair by moving a carburetor onto the floor. The room smelled of hot steel, coffee, and the hand cleaner he bought in gallon tubs. A yellow loader stood near the rear doors beneath a coat of dust. Amos drew a rough cross-section of the road on the back of an invoice. The stone culvert was too narrow 30 years ago. "Your dad knew it. Then why didn't he replace it?" "Same reason I have 3 teeth I keep meaning to discuss with a dentist." Fear? Money. He estimated the pipe, gravel, and delivery. Even using salvage stone for the head walls, the total came to more than $2,300. Mara stared at the figure. "You got that?" Amos asked. "I have a very strong emotional relationship with $11. He scratched his white eyebrow. "I can float some." "No, it's not charity. It's money I can't promise to pay back." "Most money is." She took the invoice. At the shelter, she changed out of her muddy clothes and called Denise at the motel. "I can take the Saturday night shift," Mara said. "It's Monday. I'm planning ahead. I need somebody tonight." Mara looked through the open shutter toward the broken road hidden beyond the bend. "I can't tonight. Then I can't invent hours for you." After they hung up, Mara opened the banking app. Her balance had increased to $287. The motel had deposited her last shortened paycheck. She applied for an increase on the credit card she had been using for her mother's groceries. The screen spun for nearly a minute before approving another $2,000. "Congratulations," it said. Mara laughed once. The bank was willing to trust her with more than her parents had. By noon, the water had fallen enough for Amos to climb into the ditch. He found the old stone throat split along its center and packed with roots. Ruth walked down through the pasture rather than waiting on the upper side. She carried a thermos and 3 roast beef sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. "I called the other road people," she said. Mara stopped pulling branches. "Why?" "Because they use it. Their houses are below the break. They still use the upper road." "How often?" Ruth handed her a sandwich. "Enough to bring shovels." Leon Murphy arrived first in a delivery van that smelled strongly of onions. He owned a narrow hayfield above Amos's workshop and used the road to reach its upper gate. Evelyn Shore came in work gloves and an immaculate wool coat she refused to remove. Her parcel was mostly woods, but she walked it every Sunday and considered that sufficient investment. Nobody offered Mara speeches. Leon examined the ditch and said, "That's bad." Evelyn asked where to put the stones. Ruth poured coffee into the lid of the thermos and set it on a fence post for Amos. Mara called Mercer Supply and gave them her card number. When the woman on the phone read the total, Mara nearly stopped her. Instead, she watched Daniel's truck waiting on the far side and said, "Run it." The pipe arrived at 3 on a flatbed. It had to be unloaded below the washout. Amos started his loader, which coughed black smoke and shook like it had strong objections to labor. "You ever run one?" he asked Mara. "A tractor. This is touchier and meaner. So was Dad." Amos looked at her for a moment. "He taught me to run one. That explains a lot." He put her in the seat. The controls fought her. The bucket jerked too high, dropped too fast, and scraped sparks from the edge of the flatbed, while Leon shouted advice no one could hear over the engine. On her 4th try, Mara lifted the pipe cleanly. Amos walked beside her with one hand raised, signaling small corrections. Sweat ran down her spine despite the cold. The loader's tires sank into wet gravel near the brake, and for one terrible moment, the machine tilted toward the ditch. Mara froze. "Bucket down!" Amos shouted. She lowered it. The steel struck earth and steadied the loader. Amos climbed onto the side step. "Look at me! I'm looking!" "No, you're looking at the hole. Hole's not in charge. You are." "That sounds like something printed on a mug." "It's a very expensive mug. Back up 6 inches." By sunset, the ruined culvert had been dug out. The old stones lay in piles on both sides, dark with mud. Daniel crossed the pasture and climbed down the bank to inspect the work. Claire was gone. Her SUV remained at the farmhouse, but Daniel said Ruth's beekeeper friend had driven her out through the east pasture in a utility vehicle. She would retrieve the SUV later. She recommended postponing the expansion, Daniel said, though Mara had not asked. Because of the road, because of several things. He stood with his hands on his hips, looking at the new pipe. Mara wiped mud from her cheek. "Mercer put the materials on my card. You shouldn't have done that. I'll send you your share." We didn't agree to a share. Leon and Evelyn kept placing stone, but their movements became quieter. Mara said, "Your feed truck is half the reason this road takes a beating. The farm maintained it for decades. The farm was Mom and Dad, and me." Daniel looked past her toward the loader. "You left." There it was again, offered as proof in sentence. "I came back. You always came back when something was wrong." "Things were always wrong, Daniel." He turned toward the bank. "Feed truck comes at 6, he said. "If you can't get it through, we'll have to carry the bags across." Mara looked down at her boots. "Then wear something comfortable." They worked beneath portable lights from Amos's shop. Ellis Grant arrived after the dinner rush at the Blue Lantern with 2 aluminum pans of biscuits and gravy. Mara recognized his name from the feed sacks in the shelter, though she had not seen him in years. He had once been broad and clean-shaven. Now he was leaner, with a dark beard and a white scar near his chin. "Ruth said there was a gathering," he said. "She left out the mud?" She said, "Wear boots." That's rural punctuation. He set the food on Amos's tailgate and picked up a shovel without being asked. He worked beside Leon until midnight, speaking mostly to the stones. By dawn, the pipe was buried beneath packed clay and a rough layer of gravel. The road was narrow over the repair, but Amos judged it strong enough for a loaded truck if the driver went slowly. Daniel appeared on the far side as the feed delivery came up from the highway. He looked as exhausted as Mara felt. The driver stopped beside her open window. "You, Belle?" "One of them." "Safe?" Mara looked at Amos. He nodded once. "Crawl across," she said. The truck's front tires rolled onto the repaired section. Everyone went quiet. Gravel shifted, but the bed held. The rear wheels followed, inches from the soft shoulder, then climbed safely onto the upper road. Daniel raised one hand to the driver. He did not look at Mara. Ruth passed Mara a tin cup of coffee. "You opened it?" Mara watched the truck continue toward Bellwether Farm. "No," she said. "I went into debt so he could use it." She took out her phone, photographed the repair, and started a list of every person who had worked. At the top, she wrote her own name. Ruth glanced over Mara's shoulder at the list. "You spelling Evelyn with a Y?" "I think so." "You should know before billing her. I'm not billing Evelyn. She worked 6 hours. So did I." "You brought sandwiches. Those were not free sandwiches." Mara looked up. Ruth took the pencil and wrote beside her own name, "Paid in honey, if agreeable." Leon leaned across the tailgate and added 400 pounds of crushed stone beside his. Evelyn wrote, "2 Saturdays of labor." Her handwriting was narrow and upright, even on a muddy invoice. Ellis stood at the far end eating one of his own cold biscuits. "What do I owe you?" Mara asked. "For what?" "The food. You can owe the Blue Lantern. They're used to disappointment." He brushed biscuit crumbs from his beard and took the pencil. Beside his name, he wrote, "Nothing yet." Mara disliked the yet. It had the soft sound of a door being held open. Daniel came down after the feed truck had unloaded. He stopped at the tailgate and read the list without touching it. "You putting this in a scrapbook?" "I'm keeping track. Of favors, of costs." He looked at the total from Mercer Supply. "You could have gotten the pipe cheaper through the farm account. You offered the account, not the farm's money. I was trying to help. You're extremely subtle at it." Ruth snapped the thermos lid onto the bottle. "Both of you go sleep before one of you says something worth remembering." Daniel walked back uphill. The others left in their own vehicles, tires pressing the new gravel deeper each time. Ellis stayed long enough to carry the empty food pans to his truck. At the door, he looked back at the stand. "My mother's name used to be on a sack in there," he said. "Grant," he nodded. "She sold brown bread here, hard as a roofing shingle unless you toasted it, but people claimed to like it. Did you?" "I was related to her. I had a contractual obligation." Mara rested one shoulder against the door frame. "When was this place open?" "Before I was interesting." "You're assuming that happened." His mouth shifted, almost a smile. "Fair." He drove away before she could ask anything else. Mara slept until the repaired culvert woke her. Not the culvert itself, but every tire crossing it. Each vehicle made a double crunch, a pause, then another crunch that traveled through the ground and into the cot frame. She lay beneath Ruth's quilt, counting uses of the $2,300 pipe. At 13, she gave up and made coffee in the blue mug. By afternoon, the soft shoulder had already collected 2 deep tire marks. Mara found a scrap of plywood behind Amos's shop, painted "Slow, New Culvert" across it, and propped it near the bend. The letters leaned downhill, but drivers slowed. Daniel stopped on his way back from the livestock auction. "That sign looks terrible. It's temporary. Claire's coming back Thursday. Tell her to close her eyes. She's assessing whether we can expand direct delivery." Mara glanced at the farm truck. Direct delivery over what? He followed her gaze toward the repair. "That's why the road needs to be under the farm. Ownership doesn't make gravel stronger. It makes planning possible. You plan to expand without knowing the debt or the culvert." Daniel's fingers tightened around the window frame. "You listened to one sentence about my meeting. You volunteered it. I was trying to explain. You only explain when you want me to sign something." He drove off too quickly, throwing 3 pieces of fresh gravel into the ditch. Mara added them to a bucket and carried them back. The first credit card statement arrived by email before her next full motel paycheck. The interest charge was $38. Mara read the figure twice in the laundry office, surrounded by warm white sheets and the clean chemical smell of detergent. She had once believed poverty would feel dramatic if it found her. There would be eviction notices, candles burning beside an empty refrigerator, some recognizable threshold she could refuse to cross. Instead, poverty was $38 added quietly while she was folding pillowcases. Denise came in carrying a clipboard. "You can pick up Thursday. I'm already on Thursday. Thursday morning, I work Wednesday night." Denise shrugged. "You wanted hours." Mara took it. She finished at 7 Thursday morning, drove to the stand, slept until noon, then went door to door along the road with copies of the repair total and a suggested contribution based on use. Leon handed her $80 and apologized for not having more. Evelyn wrote a check for $100, then made Mara wait while she found an envelope so it would look civilized. Ruth gave her $300 and refused to discuss it. Amos held the paper at arm's length. "You charging me for my own loader?" "No." "Your labor covers more than your share." "Good. I wasn't going to pay." "You could have started with that. Then I would have missed your face." At the farmhouse, Daniel met her outside the main barn. Claire stood inside near the sorting pens, examining a clipboard, while 2 sheep attempted to eat the bottom of her raincoat. Mara handed him the paper. He read it, folded it once, and put it in his shirt pocket. "You left your maintenance contribution blank," she said. "I noticed. I calculated the farm at 40% of the vehicle use." "You stood out there counting?" "I didn't have to count the feed truck. I could feel it from bed." His eyes went toward the barn where Claire was working. "Dad and I maintained that road for years," he said quietly. "So you're paid ahead forever?" "The farm bought the gravel last time, 6 years ago, and the time before that. Mom and Dad bought it. Their money isn't your receipt. You want to turn the road into a business, send me a contract. Until then, I'm not paying an invoice you invented after doing work nobody approved. The road disappeared. I saw it. You had a feed truck coming, and I offered the farm account. You keep offering me ways to spend my own money." Claire came out of the barn, brushing wool from her coat. Neither Mara nor Daniel moved. "Am I interrupting?" she asked. "Yes," they said together. Claire looked between them. "I'll walk the south pasture." She left by the side gate. Daniel lowered his voice. "You'd rather owe a bank than take anything from me." "The bank doesn't remind me I left." "No, it just charges 30%. Mara hated that he was right enough to make her feel foolish. "Pay your share," she said. He took the folded invoice from his pocket and held it out. No, she did not take it. The paper hung between them until Daniel set it on the hood of her pickup. The wind carried it off before she reached the farm gate. She found it caught against the drainage fence halfway down and put it in her glove compartment. That evening, Ruth brought 6 jars of honey to the stand. I said, if agreeable, she reminded Mara. I thought you meant 1 jar. I'm not paying $300 for a culvert and donating honey. What am I supposed to do with 6 jars? Sell them to who? Ruth looked toward the county highway. People in cars. The next morning, Amos appeared with a bundle of hand-sharpened mower blades wrapped in newspaper. Evelyn brought 2 boxes of early greens from a neighbor who had no vehicle. Leon left onions in a feed tub. Nobody had discussed opening the stand. They simply began filling the counter. Mara stood in the middle of it, holding a jar of honey. This is not a plan. Ruth adjusted the price card. It's Friday. Nobody expects a plan on Friday. We don't have a cash box. Amos put an old ammunition tin on the counter. We don't have bags. Evelyn produced folded paper sacks. We don't have a sign. All 4 of them looked up at the rusted bellwether produce board. Mara climbed onto a wooden crate and took it down. The back was sound beneath the flaking paint. She carried it outside, scrubbed away the dirt, and spent the afternoon restoring the letters with leftover black enamel from Amos's shop. Under the newer paint, she found a faded yellow border and traces of a painted pear at each end. Ruth watched from the railing. Your mother did those pears, she said. They're lopsided. So was she in those days. Mara cleaned her brush. You make her sound like someone else? She was someone else. Everybody gets to be more than the version that hurt you. I'm not ready for that sentence. You don't have to be ready. It isn't produce. On Saturday morning, Mara propped the restored sign beside the county pavement and arranged the jars, onions, greens, and mower blades along the counter. For 40 minutes, no one stopped. Amos went back to his workshop. Evelyn found reasons to rearrange the greens. Ruth sat in a folding chair and read a mystery novel with such concentration that it became insulting. A sedan slowed, then continued. Mara checked the prices for the 6th time. This was your idea, she told Ruth. I brought honey. Ideas cost extra. The first customer was a man in the paint-covered pants who wanted onions but had only a 20. The ammunition tin contained no change. Ruth loaned Mara $16 and made her write it down. The second customer bought 2 jars of honey. The third asked whether they had eggs, bread, or apples. Mara said no 3 times and watched the woman leave with nothing. By noon, they had sold $28. It was not enough to cover the interest on the culvert. It was enough to make the empty counter space look like a question. Ellis arrived carrying a paper sack from the Blue Lantern. He set 6 round loaves on the counter. Yesterday's, he said, still softer than my mother's. Mara pressed the top of one. It sprang back. How much? You decide. I don't know anything about selling bread. You knew enough to tell that woman you didn't have any. Ruth lowered her book. Mara made a price card. All 6 loaves sold within an hour. Late in the afternoon, Daniel's truck slowed beside the sign. He pulled into the gravel turnout and stared at the counter. What is this? He asked. A rash. His gaze lifted to the restored board. You can't use Bellwether Farm's name without asking. It doesn't say farm. It implies it. Mara looked up Bellwether Road toward the farmhouse, hidden at its end. Then she turned the sign so he could see the painted pears. It's the name of my road, she said. Daniel looked at the pears as though they had taken sides. Mom painted those, Mara said. I know. Did you? She used to paint them on the jam labels, too. Mara set down the jar she was holding. What jam labels? Daniel's expression closed as soon as he realized he had given her something. It doesn't matter. The stand closed before you were old enough to remember. You remember. I'm 7 years older. Congratulations on defeating time. A customer came up behind him, an older man carrying 2 mower blades and a bag of onions. Daniel stepped aside, but did not leave. The man nodded toward the farm. You folks selling lamb down here yet? No, Daniel said. Mara said, not yet. Daniel gave her a hard look. After the man paid, Daniel took one of Ellis's remaining loaves from the counter. How much? You don't have to buy it. I asked how much. $5. He put a 5 in the ammunition tin and carried the bread to his truck. Ellis watched from the doorway. He doesn't seem like a day-old bread person. He inherited expensive tastes. Daniel heard that. His shoulders tightened, but he got into the truck without answering. On Sunday morning, Mara found the empty bread sack folded beneath the shelter door. There was no note. She put it in the trash, then took it back out, because Ellis reused the sacks. The stand opened the next Saturday without anyone formally agreeing it would. Ruth brought honey and beeswax candles. Leon arrived with onions, potatoes, and a price list, so complicated Mara suspected he had designed it to avoid making change. Evelyn supplied greens. Ellis brought 12 loaves, 4 pans of cornbread, and a paper cup of coffee for Mara. "Coffee costs extra?" she asked. "You look like you need it more than I need leverage." She had worked at the motel until 6 that morning and slept for 43 minutes on the cot. Her face felt loose around the edges. "I look fine." "You buttoned your shirt wrong." Mara looked down. The bottom button was in the second hole, pulling the whole front sideways. "That's fashion," she said, "in very specific institutions." She went into the back room to fix it. By the 4th Saturday, Mara had developed a system. 10% of every sale went into a road fund. Producers set their own prices, though she reserved the right to tell Leon that no human mind could understand 3 onions for $2 or 7 for 5. The ammunition tin became a locking cash box. A ruled notebook tracked sales, expenses, and volunteer hours. The road fund paid $38 toward the credit card interest. Mara circled the entry twice. She still worked nights at the motel. On Thursdays, she cleaned the shelter, chalked prices, and called growers who had begun leaving messages with Ruth. Fridays were for pickup. Saturdays started before dawn and ended after the last unsold box had been returned or traded. She slept in pieces. The market grew in pieces too. A woman from the next county came back for Ellis's bread and asked whether Mara could reserve 2 loaves. A mechanic who stopped for onions wanted honey added every other week. Someone asked if Mara could assemble a box of whatever was in season and have it ready at 5 on Fridays. "Like groceries?" Mara asked, like not having to decide. Mara wrote the woman's name and number in the notebook. By the end of the day, 11 people had asked for boxes. Ellis leaned over the counter while she counted the requests. "You know what you're selling? Vegetables. A stop." "That doesn't sound edible." "People are already coming this way. You're giving them a reason to stop without driving to 4 farms. Mara tapped the notebook. 4 farms means 4 pickup trips. "I didn't say you were selling yourself a good time." Ruth, reading in her folding chair, turned a page. She never does. They packed the first subscription boxes the following Friday. Leon delivered too many potatoes. Evelyn's greens wilted because Mara left them near the west window. Ellis brought bread still warm from the diner oven and complained when she placed it beside the honey. "Heat softens beeswax." "How do you know that?" "I've ruined more things than you." "That isn't an answer. It's the foundation of experience." He moved the candles himself. Mara had known Ellis in the broad way people knew one another in a small rural county. He had been 2 years ahead of her and had left Bellwether for culinary school, though he came back before finishing. He married, opened a lunch place with his wife, closed it, divorced, and went to work nights at the Blue Lantern. Mara knew those facts because people repeated them whenever his name came up, as if one bad decade were a weather report. He never volunteered any of them. He did tell her the scar under his chin came from falling onto a pie server during the lunch place's final week. "Angry customer?" Mara asked. "Loose floor tile. That's less dramatic. The tile and I had history. He was good company because he did not require her to be grateful for it. Their first boxes contained potatoes, greens, onions, honey, bread, and a handwritten note explaining that the pears along Bellwether Road were ornamental for the time being because Amos had pruned them with a chainsaw. "They'll recover," Amos said. "You cut off half of one. Half was dead. So was the other half. Then it's fully recovered." Mara sold all 11 boxes. After paying the suppliers, the road fund made $33. She took a photograph of the money before depositing it. $33 was not rescue. It was proof of motion. The trouble began with the hand-painted sign. "Market," Mara wrote, with an arrow toward the shelter. "Farm traffic," she wrote on another board, with an arrow uphill. She placed both at the turnout so customers would stop driving past the shelter looking for the farmhouse. The signs worked until a man in a refrigerated van misunderstood farm traffic as an invitation. and drove through Daniel's open sorting gate. The sheep scattered into the barnyard. Two reached the lane before Daniel and Claire blocked the gate with their bodies. Mara heard the commotion from the shelter and ran uphill. One ewe stood in the middle of the road, chewing a mouthful of grass. The other had reached the pear trees and was stripping leaves from a low branch. Daniel came down carrying a sorting panel. "Don't chase them," Mara called. "I know that. Then stop waving metal." "I'm not waving it." The panel banged against his knee. Mara lowered her shoulders and approached the nearer ewe at an angle. She talked softly, the same nonsense her father had used when animals were frightened. "All right, ma'am. You've made your point. Nobody respects a closed gate anymore." The ewe watched her. Mara slid one hand beneath its jaw and turned it gradually uphill. Daniel moved to the other side, and together they guided it toward the yard. Claire followed with the second ewe. The refrigerated van driver stood by his open door, apologizing. "I thought market deliveries went up there," he said. Daniel pointed downhill. "Nothing for the market comes onto the farm." Mara looked at him. "Nothing? You know what I mean." "I don't, actually." "You painted the sign. And you left the gate open." "I was unloading." Claire closed the gate and fastened the chain. The lettering could be clearer. Daniel looked at her as though betrayal had become fashionable. They returned the sheep to the sorting pen. Mara checked the first ewe's legs and found no injury. When she straightened, Daniel was watching her hands. "You still remember?" he said. "Sheep haven't changed." "Some things do." Claire excused herself and walked toward the barn, leaving them beside the gate. Mara wiped grass from her palms. "You said nothing for the market comes onto the farm. I meant deliveries. You said exactly what you meant." Daniel sighed. "I can't have strangers driving through the operation. I don't want them up here. Then make the stand obvious. I'm working with a signed budget of old plywood." He glanced downhill. The shelter roof had been patched with 3 different colors of tin. Cars filled the gravel turnout and lined one shoulder. People moved between the counter and folding tables Ruth had added beneath the pear trees. "It's becoming a problem," he said. "People buying onions, traffic, parking, liability. You're encouraging the public onto a private road, at the entrance, then keep them there." Mara waited. "You could help improve the turnout." Daniel gave a humorless laugh. "So now I'm responsible for your business too?" "No, just your share of the road." He left her beside the gate. That afternoon, Mara moved the market arrow closer to the highway and painted "Not the Farm" beneath it in letters large enough to read from a moving vehicle. Ellis helped her place short posts along the turnout so cars would park parallel instead of backing into the lane. They worked after everyone else had gone. He measured the gaps by pacing them off. "Your stride isn't a unit," Mara said. "It's recognized in most southern states." "By whom?" "My mother." The last post leaned. Ellis braced it while Mara tamped gravel around the base. When she stood, they were closer than she expected. His shirt smelled like bread and wood smoke. Neither moved immediately. Then a truck came down the road, and Ellis stepped aside. Daniel slowed, but did not stop. A long livestock trailer followed behind him, its new white sides unmarked. Mara watched it pass. "That his?" Ellis asked. "I've never seen it." On Monday, the farm began receiving portable fencing. Wednesday brought new feeders. Friday morning, 2 truckloads of sheep came up Bellwether Road, their tires grinding across the repaired culvert. The cot shivered beneath Mara. She dressed and walked uphill. Daniel stood in the main barn, directing the unloading. Claire checked numbers on her clipboard. The pens looked smaller, with the new animals crowded inside. Their noise filled the rafters. "You expanded," Mara said. Daniel kept his eyes on the ramp. "I told you we were assessing it." "Assessing usually happens before buying." "I signed a supply contract." "With who?" "A regional distributor. Restaurants, independent groceries, consistent volume." Mara looked at the additional sheep. "And consistent trucks. 2 pickups a week once we're at full production, plus feed. That's how farming works. That's how roads wear out." Daniel dismissed the driver and waited until the truck pulled away. "I'll put gravel down where we need it. We need a maintenance agreement. I am not signing a contract to drive to my own house. It's not your road." His face hardened. Mara took out the notebook page where she had recorded the culvert cost and contributions. Daniel's line remained blank. "You don't get to increase your use and leave everybody else paying," she said. "The farm maintained that lane before your market existed. And now I maintain it, with Ruth's money and Amos's loader, and mine. You had $11. The words hit with the accuracy of something aimed. Mara closed the notebook. Daniel seemed to hear himself a second too late. That isn't what I meant. It's becoming your family motto. She walked down past the new feeders, past Claire pretending not to have heard, and out through the gate Daniel now kept chained. At the stone culvert, fresh tire grooves cut across the repair. The pipe beneath them held, for now. Mara crouched and pressed loose gravel back into one of the ruts with her bare hand. 2 pickups a week. Feed deliveries, market traffic, rain. The road fund contained $61. Behind her, another heavy truck turned in from the highway. The truck carried 20 tons of crushed gravel. For one hopeful second, Mara believed Daniel had ordered it for the road. Then the driver leaned out and shouted, "Where's Bellwether's loading yard?" "Top of the hill," Mara said. "Go slow over the new pipe." He gave her a thumbs up and accelerated. The truck hit the repair hard enough to bounce Mara's blue mug off the shelf in the shelter. It landed on Ruth's quilt and spilled coffee across Ohio. Mara called Daniel. "Did you order gravel?" "For the loading area. The lower road needs it. The loading area turns to mud every time it rains. And what do you think connects it to the highway?" "I said I'd put gravel where the farm needs it. The farm needs the road. Then use the maintenance money you're collecting. There are $61 in that account. Sounds like your business is thriving." Mara closed her eyes. "Tell the driver to leave 4 tons at the stone culvert. I bought it. So did I. Every time Mom needed groceries." Silence. She wished she could pull the sentence back. Not because it was untrue, because truth offered in anger became another kind of waste. Daniel said, "I'll have him spread 2 tons on the upper ruts." "That isn't where," he hung up. The empty truck came back 40 minutes later, white dust coating its tires. It left a fresh depression at the soft edge of the repaired section. Mara found a rusted coffee can in the shelter, painted "Road" in black enamel across the side, and set it beside the cash box on Saturday. People noticed it. Some dropped change. One man put in a Canadian quarter. A woman buying greens asked whether the road was toll-supported now. "It's pothole-supported," Mara said. By closing time, the can held $12.85, 2 washers, and a peppermint still in its wrapper. Ruth tipped the contents into her palm. "This won't maintain a driveway. It's symbolic. So is a flag. You can't fill a rut with one. What do you suggest?" "A meeting." Mara looked at the folding tables, the producers loading unsold goods, and Amos pretending not to listen while wrapping mower blades in newspaper. People hate meetings. They hate broken roads more. Daniel did not respond to the message inviting him. Mara sent it again with Wednesday 6:30 at the shelter beneath it. He replied with one sentence, "The farm will maintain its own needs." Mara read it to Ruth. "Good," Ruth said. "That can go in the minutes." "What minutes?" "The ones you're taking." 9 people came. Leon brought a folding chair that pinched his hand every time he opened it. Evelyn arrived with a legal pad and an expression suggesting she had been waiting her whole life to attend a meeting about gravel. Amos sat on the counter. Ellis supplied iced tea and a pan of bread pudding, left over from the Blue Lantern lunch service. Claire came without Daniel. Mara noticed her parking across the highway, avoiding the crowded turnout. "I'm here as a road user," Claire said when Ruth raised an eyebrow. "I drive it twice a week." "You personally don't owe anything," Mara said. "I expense mileage to the farm. Morally, I'm flexible." Amos took a piece of bread pudding. "You're too honest to consult." They discussed vehicle counts, storm response, and how much weight the old road could take during wet weather. Evelyn proposed a fixed annual fee based on parcel size. Leon objected that his hayfield was 10 acres of economic heartbreak and should not be compared to Daniel's operation. Amos suggested charging by axle, then admitted he had no intention of counting axles. Mara listened until the ideas stopped trying to defeat one another. "What if there's a base contribution for anyone with access?" she said. "Then commercial users add more based on how often they're hauling. The market covers its share through the 10%. Labor counts. Equipment counts. If a storm causes damage, we meet before anybody spends." Ruth nodded. "Write that." Evelyn was already writing it. Claire raised her hand slightly. "Daniel won't sign." Nobody replied. "He sees maintenance as part of the farm's historic contribution," she continued. "I'm not saying I agree. I'm telling you his position." "His position drives a feed truck," Leon said. And 2 distributor pickups a week soon, Mara added. Claire's face gave nothing away. That schedule isn't final. Then this is the perfect time to make it part of the agreement. They approved the system without Daniel. It had no grand authority behind it. It was a page in Evelyn's careful handwriting, 9 signatures, and a promise to answer the phone when water rose. Mara signed last. For the first time since Mr. Vale slid the county map toward her, the road felt less like a punishment assigned to one person. After the others left, Claire remained by the counter. "Daniel's good with the animals," she said. "I know. He understands the land. I know that too. He thinks asking for help means proving your parents chose wrong." Mara stacked cups. "Are you consulting the family now?" "No. I'm explaining why he's going to make this more difficult than it has to be. He's already doing excellent work." Claire picked up her empty travel mug. "So are you." It did not feel like a compliment. It felt like being placed on the opposite side of a scale. The first distributor shipment left Bellwether Farm 2 weeks later. Daniel washed the livestock trailer before dawn and wore a new canvas jacket embroidered with the distributor's green logo. Mara watched from the shelter as the truck came down, clean and slow, with Daniel following behind. He stopped at the county pavement to check the trailer doors. For one moment, he looked younger, not happy exactly, but aligned with the life he had been promising himself. Mara walked over. "First one?" she asked. He tested the latch again. "First contracted load." "You look official. They sent the jacket. I assumed you joined a bowling league." He smiled despite himself. Then he remembered where they were. "Claire said you held a road meeting. She attended. She shouldn't have. She uses it. She works for me." That's a sentence people love hearing. The distributor driver climbed back into the cab. Daniel put one foot on his truck's running board. "Don't ask Claire to carry messages between us." "I didn't. You put her in the middle. She chose a chair." He shook his head and got in. Mara watched the 2 vehicles turn onto the highway. She wanted the shipment to go well. She wanted it to fail just enough that he would need her. Both wishes sat in her with equal weight. The market's subscription list reached 32. Mara began Friday pickups after her Thursday night motel shift. She collected mushrooms from a grower 14 miles east, eggs from a woman near the river, and late strawberries from a hillside patch where the owner made her weigh every flat twice. She returned to the shelter by noon, packed boxes until 5, distributed them, cleaned, then prepared for Saturday. Ellis told her she was becoming hard to look at. "Thank you," Mara said. "I've been waiting for somebody to mention my decline. You fell asleep standing up. I was leaning. You were holding a potato. It was a supportive potato." He took the packing list from her. "I can finish the bread orders. I have a system. You have honey in the refrigerator and lettuce beside the stove." She looked around. He was right. "Go lie down," he said. "I'm fine. That word has lost all legal meaning around you." She grabbed the list back. Ellis let her have it. His face changed, not angry, just gone somewhere quieter. "My ex-wife used to say fine like that," he said. Then she'd work until she hated everybody who hadn't stopped her. "I'm not your ex-wife. I'm aware. Then don't make me part of whatever lesson you learned." He picked up the empty bread trays. "Lessons still under review." Mara regretted the sentence as soon as he left, but regret required energy she did not have. She worked the motel that night because Denise had offered a full shift. At 4 in the morning, a washing machine jammed with banquet linens. By the time maintenance cleared it, Mara was 2 hours behind. She reached the shelter after 7 and lay down for 20 minutes. When she opened her eyes, sunlight filled the back room. Her phone said 12:43. Mara sat up so fast the cot struck the wall. Outside, the market was half open and half abandoned. Ruth sat at the cash box with a line of customers. Evelyn's greens drooped in their cartons. Leon's potatoes had no price cards. The bread table was empty. Ellis stood near the turnout loading trays into his truck. Mara ran outside. "Why didn't somebody wake me?" Ruth gave her a look that could have stripped paint. "We tried. My phone was on. Your phone was beneath your shoulder. A customer asked what came in the subscription boxes." Mara stared at her, unable to remember. Evelyn stepped in and answered. Mara crossed to Ellis. "Where are you going?" "Blue Lantern." "The bread?" I took it back. "Why?" "It sat here 2 hours. I called. You didn't answer. I have a diner that paid for the flour. You could have left some. I left some last week. You paid me 4 days late. I paid you." That isn't the same thing. He secured the trays with a strap. Mara lowered her voice. You knew I was tired, yes? So you punish me? His eyes sharpened. No, I don't let you punish me. The words landed cleanly. Behind them, Ruth was apologizing to someone who had driven 30 minutes for reserved greens that Mara had forgotten to set aside. Leon stood near his truck with his arms folded. Mara looked at all the people whose work had arrived on time. I messed up, she said. Yes. Ellis's agreement hurt more than comfort would have. He rested one hand on the truck bed. Close early. Sleep. I can fix today. You can make today last longer. That's different. He drove away. 2 producers stopped supplying the market after that Saturday. One was the strawberry grower who had weighed every flat twice. The other was a flower farmer Mara had only just convinced to try the stand. 3 subscription customers canceled. On Sunday, Mara sat in the shelter with the sales notebook, refunding orders until the road fund fell below $40. Daniel's farm truck stopped outside. He came in carrying a shallow cardboard box. If this is another transfer paper, set it down gently. I'm low on kindling. It was in the pantry. He placed the box on the counter. Inside were small paper labels curled with age. Each showed 2 uneven yellow pears and the words, Celia Mercer's Preserves in faded black ink. Mara touched one with the end of her finger. Mom made these? For years, Daniel said. Why did she stop? Dad said Bellwether products should have the Bellwether name. Mara looked up. Daniel's face held no victory, only tired recognition. She married him, he said. She agreed. That doesn't mean she wanted to disappear. No. The answer surprised them both. Daniel glanced at the open notebook, the refunds, and the empty bread table. Heard yesterday was bad. Road gossip? Ruth. Road gossip. He pushed the box toward her. You should keep these. Mara watched him walk to the door. Daniel. He stopped. The maintenance agreement is still here if you want it. His shoulders went rigid. Good night, Mara. It's 3 p.m. He left without answering. Mara sat alone beneath the restored Bellwether sign, holding the label her mother had once put on something that belonged to her. Mara carried one of the labels to Ruth's apiary. Ruth was behind the honey shed, levering a lid from a bucket of syrup. She glanced at the paper and kept working. So, he found them. You knew they were there? I knew Celia never threw anything away that proved she'd once had an idea. Mara held the label by its edges. Daniel said she sold preserves for years. 5, maybe 6. Blackberry, pear butter, tomato jam. Nobody understood until they tasted it. Did she run the stand? Ruth set down the pry bar. You keep asking that like there's a clean answer. The stand wasn't a business the way you're making it one. People brought what they had. Celia kept track. Your father hauled tables and acted like hauling tables was management. That sounds like him. They loved each other. I didn't say they didn't. No, but you're looking for a villain in every jar. Mara studied the uneven pears. One was taller, its stem bent toward the other. Dad made her take her name off. Thomas thought Bellwether should be one name. Celia agreed because disagreeing with your father took more energy than most women had before breakfast. That's not agreeing. It was to her, eventually. Ruth wiped her hands on her trousers. People can surrender something and defend the surrender later. Otherwise, they have to admit what it cost. Mara thought of her mother describing the motel as temporary work 8 years after Mara started. She thought of Celia telling every visitor that Daniel had stayed, as if Mara's leaving were a weather event, rather than an argument with a destination. Why give me the road, then? Ruth's face softened, which Mara did not want. I don't know. She was your friend. She was your mother. We both knew parts. Mara slipped the label into her pocket. On the way back, she stopped at the Blue Lantern. The diner sat beside an abandoned furniture warehouse, its blue neon sign missing the lower half of the L. At 3 p.m, the lunch rush had emptied and the dinner crowd had not arrived. 2 men drank coffee at the counter without speaking. A waitress rolled silverware into paper napkins. Ellis stood behind the kitchen pass, trimming burnt edges from a pan of cornbread. He saw Mara and returned to the knife. I came to apologize. We're out of pie. That feels unrelated. People apologize more convincingly with pie. Mara sat at the counter. I acted like being overwhelmed meant everybody else had to absorb it. Ellis slid the trimmed cornbread into a tray. Yes. I'm not done. I didn't want you to lose momentum. I know. I also didn't want you to see me failing at the one thing I thought I was good at. He looked up. Mara took $40 from her wallet and placed it on the counter. That's what I still owe for bread. You need that. It's yours. You've got a credit card charging you criminal interest. And you have flour that doesn't accept emotional context. The waitress at the far end laughed into a stack of napkins. Ellis wiped his hands and came around the pass. He counted the money, put 20 back in front of Mara, and held up a hand before she could object. You owed me 20. I calculated 40. You included bread I took back. I caused the loss. I sold it here. Mara looked toward the empty pie case. You said it was for the diner. I'm capable of lying when irritated. She folded the 20 once and put it away. I want you to supply again, she said. I figured, same 10%. Friday delivery by 4. If I'm not there, Ruth has a key. I'll pay Saturday night. Sunday morning, Saturday. You count cash after closing when you can barely see. Sunday morning. She disliked his reasonableness. Fine, there's that word. Sunday morning. He held out his hand. Mara shook it. His palm was warm and flour rough. He did not release immediately, though perhaps she imagined the pause because she wanted one. Then the waitress called, Ellis, your wife's online too. His hand left Mara's. My ex-wife, he called back. She still has the timing, the waitress said. Ellis glanced toward the kitchen phone. We're selling the building we owned? Forms, not romance. I didn't ask. You looked like you didn't ask. He went to take the call. Mara drove back with the label in her pocket and the uncomfortable awareness that Ellis had a history capable of entering rooms without him. She changed the market before asking it to trust her again. Ruth received a key. Every producer got a one-page schedule with delivery times, payment terms, and a phone number for cancellations. Amos rewired the shelter and installed a used refrigerator from the diner, after making Mara pay him $20 so she could not call it charity. She cut her motel availability to 2 fixed nights. Denise stood beside the industrial dryer with her clipboard pressed to her chest. If you give up flexibility, I stop calling you first. I understand, do you? I can't work Thursday night and safely run Friday pickups. I didn't ask about safely. I asked if you wanted hours. Mara almost said yes. The word sat ready in her mouth, trained by years of bills and favors and family emergencies. 2 nights, she said. Denise marked the schedule. Don't ask me for more next month. Mara left before fear could negotiate on her behalf. The road boxes returned slowly. 22 subscribers the first week, then 26. Some former customers did not come back. Mara stopped treating that as a moral verdict. She packed fewer boxes correctly, paid producers on time, and slept Thursday night. Ellis brought bread every Friday at 3:45. He arranged the loaves by size, complained about Mara's chalk handwriting, and began staying to help pack. You put potatoes on top of greens again, he said. They're asserting themselves. They're crushing the lettuce. Same thing in business. He moved them. They argued about box order, tape strength, whether tomatoes belonged in paper, and why Ellis insisted on tying bread sacks with blue string. My mother used blue, he said. Her bread could roof a house. Still looked nice. The old labels remained in their cardboard box beneath the counter. Mara mounted one in a cheap frame and hung it inside the shelter, not on the products. She did not want to turn her mother's abandoned name into decoration for her own ambition. She wanted it visible enough that disappearing would require effort. During the first July maintenance morning, everyone who had signed the road agreement came with tools. Leon cut back brush near the stone culvert. Evelyn walked the ditches collecting trash with the focused disgust of someone reviewing civilization. Amos graded the lower ruts with his loader, while Mara directed traffic. Claire arrived in work clothes and spent 2 hours clearing drainage above Ruth's parcel. Daniel drove past twice. The second time, he stopped beside Mara. You're backing cars onto the highway. 3 minutes while Amos turns. It's dangerous. Then put your truck in park. He did, though irritation tightened his face. People moved around them carrying shovels and rakes. Ruth waved Claire toward a clogged ditch. Ellis had brought breakfast biscuits and was distributing them from the tailgate of Mara's pickup. Daniel watched him hand one to Amos. You've got quite a crew. We have an agreement. I know. Claire tell you? It's hard not to hear about it. Mara leaned toward his window. You can still join. The farm will handle the upper road. There is no upper road without the lower road. His gaze shifted to the framed label visible through the shelter opening. You hung one. Yes? Mom would have hated that. Why? She thought those labels looked amateur. Mara laughed. The pears are different sizes. She said they looked drunk. They do. For a moment, Daniel smiled. Then Amos honked the loader behind him, and Daniel drove on. The weather turned wet before the month ended. Rain came in short, heavy bursts that left steam rising from the pavement. The farm's new sheep stripped the upper pasture faster than the grass could recover. Feed trucks began arriving every 5 days instead of every 10. Mara wrote the dates in her road notebook. On the third Wednesday of rain, Claire stopped at the shelter. Distributor pickup is scheduled tomorrow morning, she said. Loaded tractor trailer, roads too soft, I told Daniel, and he said the driver knows rural routes. That doesn't make the ground dry. Mara walked with her to the repaired culvert. Water moved well through the pipe, but the gravel above it shifted under their boots. One shoulder had begun to slump where the first delivery truck struck it. If he drops a wheel here, the whole road closes, Mara said. Claire nodded. You're the consultant for agricultural operations. Trucks seem operational. I can advise. He owns the farm, and I own the road. Claire looked toward the hill. What are you going to do? The question disturbed Mara. Ownership had become less satisfying every time someone treated it as a weapon. I'm going to tell him what I see. Daniel was in the main barn checking weights when she arrived. He wore the green distributor jacket despite the heat. You sent Claire down to make your argument? He asked. She came on her own. Everybody comes to you on their own. The road won't hold a loaded trailer tomorrow. It held the first one. That was before 9 inches of rain. The driver decides what he can handle. The driver doesn't pay when my culvert washes out. I can't cancel a contracted pickup because you poke the gravel with your boot, then walk down and poke it yourself. Daniel set the scale sheet on a bale. If I miss the shipment, I breach the schedule. If the truck gets stuck, you miss it anyway. And the market loses a Saturday. Maybe that's what this is. Mara stared at him. He looked away first, but did not apologize. You think I want you to fail? I think you want to be the one thing this road needs. The sentence found a place she had been refusing to examine. Mara stepped closer. I want you to pay when you use something. I have paid for Bellwether every day since I was 20, not to me. No, you gotta leave before anybody could charge you. She could have answered with their mother's pills, the motel shifts, the groceries. They had used those facts so many times they had worn them smooth. Instead, she said, the truck doesn't come tomorrow. Daniel's head lifted. You can't block access. I'm not blocking it. I'm telling the distributor the road is unsafe for that weight. They can reschedule, send a smaller vehicle, or take the risk in writing and pay for damage. You don't have their number. Claire does. Anger moved through his face, followed by something closer to panic. This contract is how I keep the farm, he said. Mara had not expected honesty, and it left her without a prepared defense. Then don't ruin the only road to it. The pickup was divided between 2 smaller trucks and delayed until afternoon. Daniel did not speak to Mara while they loaded. Both vehicles crossed safely. That evening, she found a new sign planted just above the market turnout. Private farm, it read. No market traffic beyond this point. The post stood inside the road shoulder. Mara pulled it out, carried it 10 feet uphill, and drove it into Daniel's fence line, where it belonged. The next morning, the sign was back beside the road. She moved it again. By Friday, neither of them mentioned that it had traveled the same 10 feet 4 times. But when Ellis arrived with the bread, the sign was on Daniel's land. Beneath it sat a paper sack. Inside were 2 jars of her mother's old pear butter, their lids rusted beyond opening, and their labels stained brown. A note in Daniel's handwriting read, Found these behind the canning pots. Don't eat them. Mara held one up to the light. The painted pears leaned toward each other, uneven and intact. Ellis examined the jar without touching it. Cloudy lid, rust under the ring, unknown acid level. I wasn't going to eat it. You were looking at it like grief had made you brave. Mara set the pear butter beside the framed label. Mom made this before I existed. Most things were made before you existed. Thank you for putting history in perspective. He picked up the second jar. A strip of Celia Mercer's label remained beneath the brown stain. My mother used to trade bread for this, he said. She'd spread it on slices so thick you couldn't tell the bread was dangerous. Mara turned the jar in his hand. What did it taste like? Pears. Ginger maybe? Too much clove. You remember that? Bad bread makes you pay attention to the topping. Ruth remembered the clove too. She remembered that Celia cooked the pears in a wide enamel pot and added lemon near the end, but she did not remember quantities. Celia measured with her hand, Ruth said. A palm of sugar, a pinch of whatever, then she'd complain when no two batches matched. Did she write it down? If she did, Thomas probably used the paper to calculate feed. Mara walked the road looking at the old pear trees. Amos's pruning had produced an uneven crop. Some branches held clusters of small green fruit scarred by weather. Other trees had nothing but leaves. The pears would never satisfy a commercial buyer. Most were hard, misshapen, and freckled with dark spots. Ruth bit into one and nodded. Ugly enough to cook. They picked on a Sunday afternoon. Leon brought a ladder. Evelyn brought towels to cushion the fruit. Amos stood below the oldest tree directing everyone, until Mara handed him a basket and told him management paid less. Daniel passed twice in the farm truck. The second time, he stopped. What are you doing with those? Building a bowling team, Mara said. He looked at the baskets. They'll be hard. That's what Ruth says. Leave them in paper sacks for 3 days. Mara waited. Daniel leaned through his open window. Mom put an apple in each sack. For flavor? To ripen them. I knew that. You absolutely did not. He drove uphill. Ellis obtained permission to use the Blue Lantern kitchen after closing. At 10 on Tuesday night, Mara, Ruth, and Ellis stood around 20 pounds of peeled pears while the diner's neon sign buzzed in the front window. The first batch burned. Ellis smelled it before Mara did. He pulled the pot from the flame, scraped the bottom with a wooden spoon, and shook his head. Celia would haunt us for that, Ruth said. She left no recipe, Mara replied. She surrendered quality control. The second batch was too sweet. The third tasted sharply of lemon. Ruth added clove to the fourth, then denied responsibility when Ellis coughed. At 1 in the morning, Mara opened the old jar and held it beneath her nose. The seal had long since failed. The pear butter smelled like metal, dust, and a faint dark sweetness that could have been memory-inventing evidence. She threw it away. Ruth watched the old contents slide into the trash. You all right? It was already gone. Yes. Mara rinsed the jar and set it on the drying rack. The fifth batch was not Celia's. It was softer with ginger, lighter with clove, and less sweet than Ruth remembered. It tasted like pears from trees everybody had stopped expecting anything from. Ellis spread some on warm bread. This one, he said. They filled 24 jars. Mara designed simple labels using the uneven pears from Celia's originals, but changed the words to Bellwether Road Pear Butter. Beneath that, in smaller letters, she printed from Celia Mercer's old trees, made imperfectly. Ruth read the label twice. She would have hated imperfectly. Daniel says she thought the peers looked drunk. She did. Then it stays. After Ruth left, Mara and Ellis wiped down the kitchen. He washed, she dried. The old jar sat upside down between them. Did you and your ex-wife cook together? Mara asked. He kept his hands in the sink. At first. You don't have to answer. I already did. Mara dried the same metal bowl for too long. Ellis said, We opened Grant Table because we liked feeding people and hated having bosses. Turned out we hated owing money more. She wanted to close after the second year. I kept saying 1 more season, 1 more menu, 1 more loan. She left. She chose not to drown with me. He rinsed a spoon. I called it betrayal because that sounded better than admitting she had told me for a year. Do you still love her? He shut off the water. No, but I respect the version of her who walked out. Took me a while. Mara placed the bowl on the rack. I walked out, she said. From Bellwether? My father wanted me to manage books and answer phones. Daniel got livestock, fields, auctions. I proposed direct sales, and Dad laughed in front of 2 suppliers, so I left before harvest. Daniel had to do both jobs. You feel guilty. I feel correct and guilty. Those can coexist. He thinks I escaped. Did you? For a while. Ellis turned toward her. They stood close in the quiet kitchen, the smell of pear and clove clinging to their clothes. You came back, he said. For Mom. Still came back. Mara kissed him before she could turn the moment into another explanation. He went very still. Then his wet hand touched the side of her neck. The kiss was warm and brief and tasted faintly of ginger. When they separated, Ellis looked at the row of jars. We should probably discuss boundaries. Right now? No, I'm trying to sound mature. It's not convincing. He smiled and kissed her again. The pear butter sold out during the first hour of the October harvest market. By then, the Saturday stand had spread beneath 3 canvas awnings along the turnout. The road boxes were back to 40 subscribers. Ellis supplied bread, biscuits, and jars of soup from the Blue Lantern kitchen. Ruth's candles occupied an entire table. Mara hired Leon's sister, Patricia, for 4 hours on Saturdays, because paying for help was cheaper than proving she could collapse alone. The road fund covered fresh gravel at the turnout and reduced Mara's credit card balance by $600. She still slept in the back room, but Amos had sealed the leaks, and Ellis had built a shelf above the camp stove that leaned only when holding canned goods. Mara did not call it success. Success sounded like something that could notice and leave. She called it Saturday. Daniel called it congestion. His contract pickups had increased. Wet pastures drove feed costs higher, and trucks came often enough that Mara recognized the drivers. The distributor demanded narrower arrival windows. If market traffic delayed a trailer, Daniel arrived at the shelter with his jaw already set. For the harvest market, Mara placed signs a quarter mile in each direction. Market parking here. Farm access, keep clear. Ruth wore an orange vest and directed cars with more authority than anyone had granted her. At 9:15, a livestock trailer came down from the farm. The driver stopped above the turnout and blew his horn. Cars occupied both sides of the entrance, leaving a lane wide enough to pass, but not enough for the trailer to make the sharp turn onto the county pavement. Mara ran toward him, waving the nearest cars forward. Daniel arrived behind the trailer in his truck. He got out and pointed toward the market's loading space. You need to clear this. Give me 5 minutes. He has another pickup. I said 5 minutes. The driver leaned from the cab. I can back up to the farm and wait. Daniel shook his head. No. Turn here. He directed the driver into the gravel loading area beside the shelter. The trailer swung across the front counter, blocking customers and trapping Ellis's van. Daniel, he needs turning room, not through my market. This is the only safe place. You could have scheduled around Saturday. The distributor scheduled us. Then tell them no. His laugh was sharp. That might work when somebody wants onions. The trailer stopped broadside across the shelter opening. Sheep shifted inside, making the metal walls tremble. Customers stood holding bags and coffee cups. Nobody pretended not to watch. Mara felt the old urge to shout until he understood the size of what he had done. She saw the argument he expected, the one that would let him point to her temper instead of his trailer. She turned to Patricia. Move the cash box to Ruth's table. Then Mara lifted a crate of bread and carried it down the shoulder. Ellis understood first. He folded the nearest table and followed. Ruth began directing customers 20 yards toward the highway. Leon moved potatoes. Evelyn marched past Daniel, carrying greens with the expression of a queen evacuating a palace. Within 10 minutes, the market had reformed in a long line along the road shoulder. Customers parked farther away and walked. New arrivals passed Daniel's polished bellwether farm sign, past the white livestock trailer, and continued toward the tables beneath the yellow pear banner. The driver completed his turn and left. Daniel remained in the cleared turnout, surrounded by marks where the trailer tires had torn the new gravel. Mara sold out of bread while he watched. He waited until closing. By then, most people had gone. Ellis loaded tables. Ruth counted the cash. Daniel stood beside the road with his hands in his jacket pockets. You made that into a performance, he said. You parked a trailer across my counter. I was moving livestock. You were proving the farm comes first. It's a working farm, Mara. That trailer represents real money. She looked at the empty tables. What do you think these represent? 30 jars and some bread? Ellis stopped loading, but did not turn around. Mara stepped closer to Daniel. Say it again. His eyes shifted toward the cash box, the packed vehicles, the road that still held the tracks of everyone who had come. He did not. The driver offered to wait, Mara said. You decided everybody here should move. I needed the trailer off the road. You needed me to move. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. You have no idea what's happening up there. Then tell me. He looked toward the farm. Evening light caught the roof of the main barn beyond the rise. The distributor docked the last 2 shipments, he said. Weights were inconsistent. They changed the grading requirements. How much? Enough? And the feed? I'm handling it. That isn't telling me. I said I'm handling it. He walked to his truck. Mara called after him. You tore up the turnout. Daniel stopped with one hand on the door. I'll send gravel. Don't send anything. Come spread it. He got in and drove uphill. On Sunday morning, the farm tractor appeared at the shelter. Daniel used the front bucket to level the tire marks, working alone. Mara watched from the doorway without offering coffee. When he finished, he lowered the bucket and sat behind the wheel for a long moment. Then he drove back to the farm, leaving the turnout smooth enough for Saturday. Daniel did send something after spreading the gravel. It was not money. On Monday morning, Mara found a folded sheet inside the shelter door, listing the farm's truck schedule for the next month. Feed deliveries on Tuesdays. Distributor pickups every other Thursday. Equipment service on the first Friday. At the bottom, he had written, "Will notify you of changes." There was no apology and no signature on the maintenance agreement. Mara pinned the schedule beside the sales notebook anyway. On the next repair morning, Daniel sent 2 farm hands and a load of gravel. He did not come himself. The men filled ruts along the upper half, while Amos graded the lower section. Evelyn recorded the labor in her careful handwriting. "Do we credit the farm?" she asked. "We credit the people who worked." "What about the gravel?" Mara looked uphill. Credit the farm for gravel. It felt petty not to. It felt dangerous to be generous. She did it anyway. The first hard frost stripped the pear trees. Market tables moved inside the shelter, and beneath clear plastic curtains, Ellis helped hang from the awning. Business slowed, but did not disappear. The road boxes shifted to potatoes, squash, greens, bread, honey, dried beans, and soup. Ellis began staying some nights. He kept a toothbrush and a chipped cup beside the camp stove and a clean shirt on a nail in the back room. He never called the shelter home. Mara did not ask him to. They had both spent too much of their adult lives pretending not to notice when a temporary arrangement became permanent. One night, they ate tomato soup on the cot because the front room was too cold. Trucks moved on the highway beyond the trees. Mara leaned against his shoulder, listening to the repaired culvert crunch beneath a late farm delivery. "You counted," Ellis said. "What? The truck." "I did not. You went still when the rear axle crossed. It's part of my charm." He tore a piece of bread and dropped it into the soup. Claire came into the diner. Mara sat up. "When?" "Lunch." "Why?" "For lunch, I suspect." "What did she say?" "That Daniel canceled their regular meetings." "He fired her?" "She said they'd completed the expansion work." Mara stared at the plastic curtain moving in the wind. Ellis touched her knee. "Don't run uphill. I'm sitting down. You're already halfway there. He's in trouble." "You knew that." "I didn't know he'd cut Claire." "You don't know why." Mara put the soup bowl on the floor. If he loses the farm, you will not have caused it by finishing dinner." His voice was gentle. She resented him for using it. "You don't understand. I understand that you've spent months building something with 9 people, 40 subscribers, and a road account that finally has 4 digits in it. If Daniel asks for help, help him. Don't turn the whole thing upside down so he never has to feel the asking." Mara stood and took the bowls to the stove. "I'm not Mom. I didn't say you were. No, you said your ex-wife worked until she hated everybody. I said I worked until she left." She turned. Ellis's face was calm, but his shoulders had drawn tight. "Don't use her to win arguments with me," Mara said. "Then don't use your mother to have arguments I didn't start." The shelter seemed much smaller. Ellis put on his boots and left. Mara washed the bowls in cold water. His toothbrush remained beside the stove, irritatingly confident that he would return. 3 days later, the distributor truck arrived empty. It passed the shelter at 7 in the morning and came back down less than an hour later with nothing loaded. Daniel followed it in the farm truck, close enough that both vehicles crossed the stone culvert before the first sound had faded. Mara watched them stop near the highway. Daniel got out and walked to the driver's window. Their conversation lasted less than a minute. The driver shook his head, handed Daniel a clipboard, and pulled onto the pavement. Daniel remained beside the road with the papers in one hand. Mara put on her coat. He heard her approach, but did not turn. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing you can fix. I didn't say I could." The weight range changed. "Again?" "They're standardizing suppliers." "What does that mean?" "It means half the animals are below their new minimum, and the other half are scheduled too late. Will they come back?" Daniel folded the papers. "They suspended pickups." "For how long?" "They didn't specify." She waited. He stared across the county highway at a field of cut corn stubble. I ordered feed based on the contract, he said. I leased the trailer. I increased the flock because their forecasts said they needed volume. Now they can fill it cheaper somewhere else. Claire warned you. She warned me about cash flow. She didn't know they'd change grading. Why did you stop meeting with her? Because every meeting cost money to hear that I needed money. His laugh was brief and ugly. Mara looked uphill. The farm could not be seen from there, only the lane leading to it. We could offer lamb through the road boxes, she said. Daniel finally turned. How much? I don't know. I'd have to ask customers, arrange orders with a processor, set pickup dates. 40 boxes won't solve this. No, but it's something. The bellwether name could move more than 40. That would still take time. He rubbed his thumb along the folded edge of the rejection papers. Put out an announcement. Bellwether Farm Direct Lamb. Holiday orders. Mara heard the command before Daniel did. If you supply through the market, you use the same terms as everyone else. His eyes narrowed. What terms? 10% to the road fund, confirmed quantities, delivery on schedule, payment after customer pickup. If people cancel, you keep the product or cover storage. You want 10% of my sales? The market takes 10% from Ruth, from Ellis, from everybody. This road exists because of the farm. The market exists because I made it. With our name, with my road. He looked toward the sign above the shelter. Bellwether, yes. You think strangers started coming because of a culvert? I think they came for what was on the tables. And where do you think the story came from? The old stand, Mom's labels, those trees? That's farm history. Mara felt the jar label beneath her mother's frame, watching them both. You inherited the farm, she said. You didn't inherit every memory attached to it. I'm asking you to help keep it alive. No, you're asking me to move your product and thanking yourself in advance. Daniel shoved the papers into his jacket pocket. Forget it. Ask me properly. His expression changed. What? Say you want to become a supplier. Agree to the terms. Don't tell me the bellwether name is payment. I'm not one of Leon's onion patches. No. Leon pays his share. Daniel walked back to his truck. Mara stood in the turnout until he drove away. The victory she had imagined during the will reading should have felt better. Daniel had the farm and needed her road. He had refused every agreement, mocked the road fund, and treated her market as a nuisance. Now he had come down from the farmhouse asking for access to what she built. She had made him leave with nothing. The satisfaction lasted less than 10 seconds. By afternoon, Ruth had heard about the suspended pickups. Daniel told you? Mara asked. Feed driver, of course. Ruth arranged candles on the counter. You offering his lamb? I offered. He refused the terms. What tone did you use? The same tone I use with everybody. Ruth looked at her. Fine. A slightly more historically informed tone. You want to punish him? Yes. Then say that. Don't call it accounting. Mara slammed the cash box shut. If I bend the rules for him, everybody here pays for it. True. He has more traffic than anyone and still hasn't signed. True. He threw me out. Also true. Mara waited for the contradiction. Ruth picked up another candle. Being right can still be unkind. That sounds like something people tell women when they stop volunteering to be used. Sometimes. I'm not rescuing him. I didn't ask you to. Ellis did. Ellis asked you not to rescue him. Mara frowned. How do you know? He came for coffee. At your house? Where else would he go? Blue Lantern coffee tastes like a tire fire. Mara walked to the doorway. Daniel's private farm sign stood on his fence line. Beyond it, the road curved upward beneath empty pear branches. What did Ellis say? That you had a fight. That he was probably right in an irritating way. Did he say he was coming back? No. The answer opened a hollow place Mara refused to inspect while Ruth was watching. Daniel took the rejected animals to the county auction the following week. Prices were low. Mara knew because Leon knew. And Leon knew because his cousin bought feed from a man who attended. The money Daniel received barely covered transport. More animals remained. Feed trucks kept coming. The new livestock trailer disappeared from the yard. Then one of the portable fencing deliveries came back down. The panels stacked neatly and strapped for return. Daniel's embroidered distributor jacket stopped appearing. Mara saw him only through the windshield. At the first December market, a cold wind pushed beneath the plastic curtains. Customers came in coats, stamped their feet, and bought soup, bread, and candles. Ellis delivered his trays at 3:45 on Friday, spoke to Ruth, and left before Mara returned from pickups. His payment envelope waited beside the notebook. On Saturday, Mara drove to the Blue Lantern after closing. Ellis was mopping behind the counter. "I'm sorry," she said. He kept mopping. "I used Mom to make myself untouchable. And I acted like you were trying to control me when you were asking me not to abandon everything for Daniel." Ellis pushed the mop beneath a stool. "That's accurate. I'm not apologizing with pie because you're out. We have pecan. I'm not apologizing with pie because I'm sincere." He leaned the mop against the counter. Mara took a breath. "I also may have enjoyed making Daniel ask me for something." "Did he ask?" "Not well." "Did you answer?" "Also not well." Ellis rested both hands on the counter. "Are you going to help him? If he agrees to the same terms." "Good. That's all? What did you want? A sermon?" "I drove 12 miles. You can have pecan." She smiled. He came around the counter and stopped in front of her. "I don't want to watch you disappear into your family every time one of them hurts. I don't want that either. But I don't know what helping looks like when I also want revenge." Ellis nodded. "Probably looks inconsistent." He kissed her forehead. Mara closed her eyes. On Monday morning, Daniel came to the shelter carrying the supplier agreement. His signature was at the bottom. He placed it beside the cash box without speaking. Mara read every line, though she knew them by heart. "How many animals?" she asked. 28, if the processor can schedule them. Holiday pickup is too soon. We'll have to offer January." Daniel nodded. 10% goes to the road. I read it. You deliver on time. I read it, Mara. She looked up. He stood on the other side of the counter where Ruth, Leon, Ellis, and every producer stood when bringing something they had made. "Do you want a supply through the market?" she asked. His jaw tightened. Then Daniel said, "Yes." Mara signed beneath his name. It was not forgiveness. It was the first agreement they had ever made as equals. The processor could schedule 18 animals in January. Daniel wanted 28. "They have one opening," Mara said. 18 is what they can handle. What am I supposed to do with the other 10? Keep them, auction them, or wait for the next date? Feed costs money while they wait. So does freezer space when meat sits unsold. They stood behind the shelter counter with the processor's order sheet between them. Daniel had begun coming down before the market opened, when no customers could witness him being instructed. "I have buyers," he said. "We have expressions of interest. What's the difference?" "Money." "I know the difference between money and interest. Then stop trying to make me promise 28. His mouth tightened. Mara expected him to remind her that he had raised livestock his entire adult life. Instead, he took the pencil and changed the order. 18, he said. It was a small surrender. He made it look physically painful. Mara sent order forms to the subscription list. Ellis added recipes for lamb stew and slow-roasted shoulder, refusing to include anything that called for ingredients unavailable within 20 miles. "People have salt," Mara said. "They have bad salt. There is no regional virtue in salt. That's why you don't write recipes." Orders came slowly for the first 2 days, then filled after Ruth began mentioning them to every honey customer with the subtlety of a fire alarm. Bellwether's prices were higher than the distributor had paid, even after processing and the market's 10%. But 18 animals did not become 200 acres of salvation. They covered feed, part of the processing, and one overdue equipment payment. Daniel delivered the frozen packages on a Friday in labeled cartons. He had arranged them by cut and customer name. Every weight matched the order sheet. Mara opened the first carton. "This is annoyingly organized. I run a farm. You lose paperwork in your truck. I lose irrelevant paperwork. The road agreement? Consistently irrelevant." He brought in the remaining cartons. Ellis arrived with bread and found Daniel standing inside the walk-in cooler Amos had assembled from insulated panels and a used refrigeration unit. "You living down here too?" Ellis asked. Daniel climbed out. "No." "Good. We're tight on cots." Mara shot Ellis a warning look. Daniel brushed frost from his sleeve. "Your Grant, last I checked. My mother bought bread from your mother. Everybody survives somehow." Daniel almost smiled. Pickup day brought customers in waves. Mara checked names and payments while Daniel retrieved packages from the cooler. At first, he spoke only when someone asked him a direct question. Then, a customer wanted to know how the animals were raised, and Daniel changed. His shoulders loosened. He explained pasture rotation, winter feed, and why shoulder meat needed more time than chops. He did not make the farm sound grand. He made it sound specific. Wet ground, stubborn animals, mineral blocks, fences that failed at the worst hour. People listened because he was not trying to charm them. Mara watched from the cash box. This was the Daniel their father had seen, and she had refused to see once envy made him easier to flatten. At the end of the day, he helped sweep. "Don't get ambitious," he said when he noticed her looking. "I was wondering if you know which end to hold." He handed her the broom. Sales covered every order. No meat remained. Daniel's share went into an envelope. The road's 10% went into the coffee can before being deposited. He watched Mara write the amount in the notebook. "You really put all of it there. Where did you think it went?" "I didn't know. You thought I was buying luxury camp stoves? I thought 10% was high." "Still do?" "Yes." Mara laughed. Daniel picked up his envelope. "Next processing date? March. How many? We ask customers first." He nodded reluctantly. Before leaving, he put $50 into the road can. Mara looked at him. "For the gravel amo spread," he said. "Not the agreement." "Of course. Don't make a ceremony. I wasn't going to. Your face was." He left before she could ask what kind of ceremony involved $50 in a coffee can. The second direct sale filled 21 orders. Daniel brought Mara a list of available cuts instead of telling her what to move. He delivered on time. When one customer canceled, he took the package back without argument. The farm did not recover. Feed invoices remained higher than direct sales could cover. The distributor formally ended the contract. Daniel returned the leased trailer and sold an older tractor their father had bought, used. Mara saw it go down the road on a flatbed, its yellow wheels turning slowly in the air. She remembered sitting on its fender while Thomas taught Daniel to steer. Mara had begged for a turn. Her father said she could ride when her brother knew what he was doing. Daniel was still learning when the tractor disappeared. He came to the shelter after closing one evening with a rolled map under his arm. Mara's body went cold at the sight of it. "I'm not signing over the road. I'm not asking." He spread the farm survey across the counter. Unlike Mara's thin yellow parcel, Daniel's land filled most of the page. He pointed to the southern ridge and 2 hayfields beyond it. "I'm selling this section." Mara stared at the line he had drawn. "How much?" 63 acres. "To who?" "Leon's cousin is interested in the hayfields. A cattle farmer wants the ridge." "You already talked to buyers?" "I've talked to neighbors. You didn't talk to me." Daniel looked up. "Do you want to buy 63 acres? You know I can't." "Then what was I supposed to ask? Whether selling it was the only option." "It is. You could reduce the flock more." "I am." "Sell equipment." "I did." "Refinance." "With what income?" The answers arrived too quickly. He had been having this argument alone. Mara looked at the farmhouse square on the map, the barns, the pasture their mother's kitchen window faced. Dad would hate this. Dad is dead. The words struck the counter between them. Daniel rolled the map halfway, then stopped. "I'm sorry." "No." "You're right." He left dead against the farm and called it a legacy. Mom left it untouched because she couldn't bear to contradict him after he was gone. "And you accepted it. I accepted the keys. The rest was already attached." Mara thought of his palm covering the brass keyring in Mr. Vale's office. She had seen possession. Maybe part of it had been fear. "What will selling the 63 do?" she asked. "Clear the feed account, the remaining equipment lease, and most of the operating line. If I keep a smaller flock, I can hold the house, barns, and core pastures. You'd still have the road access." Daniel gave her a tired look. "Generous of you." "That came out wrong. It came out accurate." She touched the map where the southern ridge met Bellwether Road. "Will the buyers use this entrance?" "The hayfields have access from Miller Lane. The ridge track can use it too. So, no new traffic." "I knew you'd ask." Mara wanted to object, because selling family land felt like another decision made without her. The hypocrisy was immediate and unpleasant. She had spent months insisting the road was hers. Now Daniel was using the same fact about the farm. "Tell me before it closes," she said. "I'm telling you now. No, tell me when it's real." He nodded and rolled the map. At the door, he paused beneath Celia's framed label. I used to help Mom stick those on jars, he said. She'd pay me a penny each. You got paid? Don't start. How many? Enough to buy a red pocket knife at Mercer's. I always wondered where that came from. Dad took it away because I cut the porch railing. You told me you fought off a stray dog. I improved the story. Mara smiled despite the ache in her chest. After he left, she stood outside and looked up the road. Somewhere beyond the curve, 63 acres were already loosening from the farm in Daniel's mind. Winter thawed into a muddy early spring. Rain returned before the ground could absorb it. The new pipe held, but the ditches above it began carrying reddish silt from the farm's upper pasture. Daniel's expanded flock had grazed the hillside nearly bare before he reduced it. Every storm sent more soil down the slope. Mara walked the ditch with Amos. This wasn't here last year, she said. Wasn't this many hooves up there last year? They cleared the silt twice. After the third rain, Amos told her the upper ditch needed reshaping before the next major storm. Mara added it to the maintenance list and sent the estimate to everyone. Daniel replied that he could supply the farm excavator after the land sale. When is that? She asked by phone. 2 weeks, maybe 3. The forecast says heavy rain Friday. I can't pull the excavator off pasture work. Pasture work is causing the runoff. I sold half the flock after they stripped the hill. What do you want, Mara? For you to come look. I know what mud looks like. Apparently not when it belongs to you. He hung up. Rain began Friday afternoon and continued through the market setup. Mara canceled Saturday's outdoor tables, moved subscriptions inside, and asked producers to delay anything that could not be stored. By evening, water ran high in both ditches. Ruth came down before dark. The apiary slope is slipping, she said. Not bad yet. Mara put on her raincoat. They walked uphill with flashlights. Above the stone culvert, red water rushed through the drainage channel, carrying clumps of grass and sheep wool. The pipe swallowed it, but debris collected against the upstream opening. Amos arrived with rakes. Leon came 10 minutes later. They cleared branches until midnight. Daniel did not come. He's moving animals from the lower barn, Ruth said. Mara nodded without answering. The rain intensified after 1 in the morning. Water struck the shelter roof so loudly that Mara did not hear her phone. Ruth did. She shook Mara awake on the cot. Amos says get up. They drove his pickup as far as the lower bend. Water covered the road ahead. The repaired culvert was still in place, but the embankment on its farm side had split open. Runoff had cut a new channel around the pipe. Gravel poured into it like grain through a torn sack. Daniel's headlights appeared uphill. He climbed out into knee-deep water. We need to open the pipe. The pipe is open, Mara shouted. The bank's going. A section of shoulder collapsed. Daniel moved toward it. Stay back. He stopped. Across the widening cut, his face looked pale in the headlights. The feed truck comes Monday, he said. Mara stared at him through the rain. Ruth's apiary was trapped above the washout. Bellwether Farm was trapped. The market deliveries scheduled from the upper parcels could not come through. Everybody would expect Mara to find money, call Amos, borrow equipment, and begin before sunrise. She had done it once. She took out her phone and photographed the broken bank. Then she opened the road group and typed, Road closed. Repair meeting at the shelter, 8 a.m. No work begins until costs and labor are agreed. Daniel's phone lit in his hand. He read the message across the gap. Mara, no. The animals need feed. Then you should come to the meeting. You know I'll help. You told me that last storm. I brought gravel, $50 and 2 farmhands. What do you want me to say? I want you to stop asking after the road breaks. Another piece of the shoulder slipped away. Daniel looked down at the water, then back at her. All right, he said. It was too easy. Mara did not trust it. All right, what? I'll be at the meeting. She turned away before relief could become forgiveness. At 8 the next morning, every chair in the shelter was occupied. Daniel arrived last. He carried the farm's maintenance agreement, signed at the bottom. Daniel laid the signed agreement on the counter. Evelyn reached for it before Mara did. She checked the signature, turned the page over, and held it toward the window, as if Daniel might have written in disappearing ink. Looks valid to me, she said. It was always valid, Daniel replied. Not without you. Every chair was occupied. Amos sat on the old ammunition tin because Leon had taken his place on the counter. Ruth stood beside the camp stove pouring coffee. Ellis had arrived from the Blue Lantern with biscuits and a clean shirt for Mara. Nobody applauded Daniel. Mara was grateful. She spread Amos's repair estimate beside the agreement. The pipe itself had held, but water had cut away 20 feet of packed roadbed. The upstream ditch needed reshaping, the broken shoulder needed stone, and the bank above the culvert had to be stabilized before more rain. The runoff came from the farm pasture, Mara said. Daniel nodded. Mostly. The market didn't cause this one, Amos added. I know. Evelyn read the estimated total. How do we divide it? The agreement says extraordinary damage can be assigned by cause and use, Mara said. I propose the farm covers half the materials, supplies the excavator, and provides labor. The road fund covers 20%. The remaining material cost is divided among the other commercial users. Residential users can contribute labor. Leon raised a hand. My hayfield is commercial in theory only. Then give us the van in 2 days. My van smells like onions. It already did. Ruth said, Apiary can cover 300 in food. Amos pointed at the damaged bank on Mara's photographs. Farm needs to bring stone from the upper field wall. Daniel glanced at him. Dad built that wall. Your dad rebuilt that wall. It's drainage stone, not the Lincoln Memorial. Daniel rubbed a thumb over the signed agreement. Use the loose section near the lower pasture, he said. Not the north wall? Mara wrote it down. Nobody promised what they did not have. Evelyn could give a day. Leon offered the van and 2. Ruth contributed cash and meals. Amos offered his loader and refused any valuation that included depreciation because, as he explained, the machine had already depreciated into a personality. The road fund would be nearly emptied. Daniel would owe most of his cash portion to Mercer Supply. He had enough room on the farm account to order geotextile, gravel, and a load of larger stone, but the invoice would come due before the land sale closed. You sure? Mara asked. No. It was the most honest answer in the room. She looked at the list. Every cost had a name beside it. Every task had a person. All right, she said. We start. The feed truck still came Monday. It stopped below the washout, loaded with 50-pound bags. Daniel positioned a farm wagon on the upper side. They laid 2 wide planks across the narrowest part of the cut and formed a line. Amos insisted he could carry 2 bags at once. Ruth told him he could enjoy 2 hernias at once. Ellis carried bags over the planks while Mara steadied the lower end. Daniel stacked them on the wagon. The work was slow, wet, and without dignity. Mud coated the bags. One split against Leon's belt buckle and spilled pellets into the ditch. The sheep on the hill heard the feed and began calling with enough outrage to suggest deliberate neglect. Tell them to file a complaint, Mara said. They have, Daniel answered. After the last bag crossed, the truck driver handed Mara the delivery slip. Who signs? She passed it across the gap to Daniel, the farm. He signed and handed it back. The driver watched the exchange. Family operation? No, Mara and Daniel said. The driver nodded as though that confirmed it. They worked for 3 days. Daniel ran the farm excavator from the upper side. Mara used Amos's loader below. They removed the waterlogged soil, widened the channel around the pipe, and rebuilt the roadbed in compacted layers. Amos checked every grade with a level old enough to resent modern measurement. When Mara dropped the loader bucket too sharply, Daniel signaled from the excavator cab. Easy. She gave him the signal their father had used for Mind Your Own Machine. Daniel laughed loudly enough that she heard him over both engines. At dusk, Ruth set out stew and biscuits on Amos's tailgate. People ate standing, too tired to seek chairs. Ellis leaned against Mara's shoulder while she finished a bowl. You asked me for help this time, he said. I sent you a message. You wrote, if you're coming, bring food. That was an emotionally complete request. It contained a comma. I was impressed. She nudged him with her elbow. He had not taken over. He carried bags, moved stone, fed people, and left when he had diner shifts. Each time he returned, he asked where Mara needed him. It should not have felt revolutionary. It did. On the second night, everyone left except Mara and Daniel. The excavator remained parked above the cut. Portable lights cast hard shadows across the rebuilt bank. Mara tamped gravel with the loader, while Daniel watched from the edge. When she shut off the engine, the sudden quiet made the water sound louder. You're holding the bucket too high when you back, he said. You're welcome to inherit the loader. I'm trying to keep you from tipping it. Amos already gave me the mug speech. What mug speech? Hull's not in charge. I am. Daniel considered that. That does sound like Amos. Mara climbed down. Her arms trembled from the machine's vibration. Daniel handed her a bottle of water. For several minutes, they stood beside the open roadbed drinking without speaking. The farmhouse lights glowed beyond the trees. I should have come Friday night, he said. You were moving animals. I could have come after. Yes, I saw the ditch that afternoon. I knew it was worse. Mara screwed the cap onto the bottle. Why didn't you call? Because you had told me so. That's a poor emergency plan. I know. He kicked a loose stone into the trench. I thought if I fixed it before you saw, it wouldn't count. Did that work? Exceptionally. Mara sat on a stack of unused stone. Daniel remained standing until she moved her boot, making room. He sat beside her. Our parents did this to us, he said. Which part? The mud? All of it. Mara looked at him. That's convenient. I didn't say we had no part. You took the farm. You think I could have said no? Yes. To what? Dad spent 20 years telling me every fence I fixed was another piece of bellwether I'd earned. Mom called me the farmer before I knew if I wanted to be anything else. You could have left. And given him proof that neither of us was worth it? Mara heard the old desperation beneath the adult words. Daniel rubbed mud from his palm with his thumb. I got accepted into a machinery program in Ohio. She stared. When? I was 20. You never told me. I didn't go. Dad stopped you? He said the farm needed me. Mom cried because Ohio sounded far. So I stayed. Mara thought of all the times she had described Daniel's staying as obedience rewarded. Did you want to go? For about 10 years. And after? After that, I wanted staying to mean I was right. The portable lights hummed. Mara said, Mom gave you the farm because you stayed. She gave me what I was afraid not to want. She gave me what she thought I'd do anyway. Daniel bent forward, elbows on his knees. I hated you for leaving. I know. I hated you more every time you came back. That surprised her. Why? Because you'd walk into the barn and see everything I was doing wrong. Then you'd fix Mom's bills or catch a sick ewe or clear the lower ditch with Dad and leave again before any of it could become your whole life. You thought I was judging you? You were. I was jealous of you. He looked at her. You got the work that counted, she said. Dad introduced you to buyers. Mom put your name on everything. I got emergencies. Daniel's face tightened. She asked for you, he said. Mom, when she got worse, I'd sit with her, and she'd ask when you were coming. She asked me where you were. I know. The cruelty of it was so ordinary Mara almost laughed. Their mother had kept each of them reaching across her toward the other. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. I let you do too much, he said. With her. Yes. I told myself you were better at it. I was better because I practiced while you avoided it. Yes. The agreement came without defense. Mara looked down at the mud packed around her boots. You put my boxes on the porch, I know. You covered them with a tarp and thought that made it decent. I didn't think it made it decent. Why did you do it? Daniel stared toward the farmhouse. The keys scared me. That is not an answer. It's the one I have. I had the farm, the debt, Claire telling me half the operation needed restructuring, and you in the house looking at me like I'd stolen something. I wanted one room where the decision was already made. So, you made me homeless, yes. The word did not repair anything. It gave the damage its correct name. I'm sorry, he said. Mara waited for relief. What came was grief, late and heavy. I wanted the farm to destroy you, she said. Daniel's head turned. When the distributor rejected the shipment, part of me was happy. I wanted Mom's choice to look as cruel and stupid as it felt. How large a part? The first hour? Most of me. He nodded slowly. Fair? No. Understandable. Not fair. Ruth teach you that? Unfortunately. Daniel smiled without humor. They sat until the portable lights attracted moths despite the cold. Selling the ridge closes Friday, he said. Is it enough? If I keep the flock small? If the direct sales hold? If nothing else breaks? Mara looked at the cut road in front of them. Something else will break, I know. For the first time, the sentence sounded less like doom than adulthood. They finished the roadbed the next afternoon. Amos drove the loader across first, stopping halfway to bounce the bucket experimentally. Don't do that, Mara shouted. Testing. You're enjoying yourself. Also testing. The repaired bank held. One vehicle at a time followed. Leon's van, Ruth's pickup, the farm wagon, Ellis's car. Daniel crossed last in the farm truck. On the lower side, he stopped beside Mara and handed her an envelope through the window. Inside was a check covering the farm's share of the current repair and the unpaid portion of the first culvert work. Mara counted it twice. The land hasn't closed, she said. I sold the breeding trailer. You need that. I need the road more. She folded the check and put it in her pocket. Agreement says payments are due in 30 days. I know. You didn't have to do this today. I know. Neither thanked the other. Daniel looked uphill, then back at her. I'm cooking at the house Sunday, he said. Nothing good. Probably stew. Mara waited. You can come, he added. It was not an order. It was not an assumption. She glanced toward the shelter where Ellis and Ruth were packing the portable lights. Ask me properly. Daniel's mouth pulled to one side. Will you come to supper? Mara looked past him at the road they had rebuilt together. Yes, she said, but I'm bringing bread. On Sunday, Mara made Ellis stop the car below the farmhouse. We can park closer, he said. I know. The porch looked exactly as it had the day her boxes sat beneath the blue tarp. Daniel had replaced one loose spindle. A pair of muddy boots waited beside the door, toes pointing toward the yard. Through the kitchen window, steam clouded the glass. Ellis rested both hands on the steering wheel. Want me to go in first? No. Want me to wait here? No. Excellent. I've narrowed my role. Mara picked up the bread basket. Daniel opened the door before they reached the porch. He wore the green distributor jacket with the embroidered logo removed, leaving a darker rectangle over his chest. You're early, he said. We're 4 minutes late. I planned for you to be later. That does sound like family planning. He stepped aside. Mara paused at the threshold. Daniel noticed but did not fill the silence. Come in, he said. She did. The farmhouse smelled of lamb stew, scorched onions, and the lemon furniture polish Celia had used every Saturday. Daniel had set 3 places at the kitchen table. Their mother's chair remained where it had always been, facing the window, but he had not put a plate there. Mara placed the blue mug beside her own setting. Daniel looked at it. You brought your own cup? You only have 11 others. I have 12. Mom's bird mug cracked. I glued it. That doesn't make it drinkable. It holds pens. Ellis put down the bread and examined the pot on the stove. Did you brown the meat? Daniel frowned. It's brown now. That is not the same thing. You can leave. After smelling this, I feel responsible. Ellis took over the stove with the confidence of a man who understood that some arguments were invitations. He added salt, found vinegar in the pantry, and lowered the heat. Daniel objected twice, then handed him a spoon. Mara stood near the table, unsure what to do with her hands. The kitchen had become Daniel's. Farm invoices occupied the basket where Celia once kept catalogs. Claire's maps were rolled inside an umbrella stand. A line of feed store receipts was clipped to the refrigerator. Nothing had been transformed. It had merely drifted toward the person still living there. Your room is empty, Daniel said. Mara looked toward the hall. I moved the office into Dad's room. You could have done that before. Yes. The answer was too direct to fight. Why tell me? There are things in the closet that are yours. What things? Clothes, some books, Mom's sewing box. I didn't want to decide. Mara followed him down the hall. Her old room contained the bed frame, a bare mattress, and 4 pale rectangles where pictures had hung. Daniel had stacked her remaining belongings in the closet. The sewing box sat on top, dark wood worn white at the corners. Mara opened it. Spools of thread filled the upper tray. Beneath them lay pearl buttons, packets of needles, a bent measuring tape, and several scraps of paper on which Celia had tested the painted pear design. No explanation waited there, no apology. Just one pear too round, another too narrow, stems leaning in different directions as her mother tried again. Daniel stood in the doorway. Do you think she knew? He asked. Knew what? That the road could become what you made? Mara studied the paper. No. He seemed surprised. I think she thought she was giving me the part nobody wanted, Mara said. Maybe she thought it was practical. Maybe she thought I'd sell it to you and leave. I don't need her to have secretly understood me. Daniel leaned against the frame. That would make it easier. For her. Mara put the scraps back into the box. She loved me. She was also wrong about me. Both things fit, neither repaired the other. She carried the sewing box to the kitchen. The stew was edible after Ellis's intervention. Daniel opened a jar of Ruth's honey to serve with the bread and used enough to make her complain when she heard about it later. They discussed the land sale only after the bowls were nearly empty. It closes Friday, Daniel said. The cattle farmer decided against the ridge. Leon's cousin is buying all 63. That's better. He'll keep it in hay. Lease the ridge pasture back to me if I need it, will you? No. Daniel tore bread into pieces without eating them. I walked the southern fence yesterday. Dad's repair from the ice storm is still holding. Mara remembered that repair. Thomas had worked 3 days in freezing rain rather than hire help, then spent a week blaming everyone for his back. You could keep 1 acre, she said. That's not how being sensible works. You just started. Give it time. He smiled, then looked through the kitchen window toward land they could not see. I thought selling would feel like cutting off a limb. What does it feel like? Admitting the limb belonged to the bank. Mara reached across the table and took one of the bread pieces he had torn. The sale closed. No one gathered to watch. No bell rang. Daniel drove into town wearing a clean shirt, signed what needed signing, and came home with 63 fewer acres and enough money to clear the operating line, feed account, and equipment lease. The next morning, he removed the bellwether sign from the southern gate and carried it to the barn. Mara found him there, sanding the old lettering away. You could leave it, she said. It isn't bellwether now. It was. Daniel ran his thumb through the dust. That's the problem with signs. They talk like nothing changes. He cut the board into smaller pieces and used them to repair a lambing pen. Mara did not tell him their father would have hated that. Daniel knew. The farm became quieter. Half the flock went to auction or direct buyers. Feed deliveries fell from every 5 days to every 2 weeks. Daniel rotated the remaining animals through the core pasture and seeded the bare upper slope. When rain came, the ditch carried clear water instead of red silt. He supplied lamb through the market 4 times that year. Each time, he delivered on schedule, paid the 10%, and complained about the paperwork. He began bringing eggs from the farm's small laying flock, though he insisted they were temporary until sales became consistent. By autumn, his egg cartons had Bellwether Farm stamped across them in plain black ink. Mara did not ask why he had not used the painted pears. The road agreement acquired grease stains, coffee rings, and 2 amendments. Heavy deliveries waited 48 hours after major rain. Commercial users reported schedules in advance. Labor credits were recorded beside cash contributions, with Amos forbidden from assigning his loader an hourly value based on sentimental rarity. Daniel attended the meetings. He still argued. He objected to the spring gravel budget, rejected Evelyn's proposal for matching reflective posts, and once spent 20 minutes disputing whether a tractor pulling a wagon counted as 2 vehicles. But he sat in a chair, took minutes when asked, and signed his name when votes were finished. Mara paid off the Culvert credit card in August. She made the final payment at the Blue Lantern counter while Ellis refilled sugar dispensers. The banking app displayed a burst of digital confetti. That feels disrespectful, she said. Confetti? I went into debt because the road fell into a creek. It looks like I won a game show. Ellis leaned over to see. You could print it and frame it beside Mom's label. Family achievements. She closed the app and put the phone down. What now? He asked. Now I keep enough in the road fund that a storm doesn't decide whether I eat. I meant tonight. Oh, you're difficult to date. You knew that? I had evidence. They ate pie after his shift. Mara left the motel at the end of that month. Denise accepted the resignation without surprise. If the conferences pick up, you can call, she said. I won't. Denise looked over her clipboard. Good. The answer warmed Mara more than an offer to return would have. She did not become wealthy when she stopped folding hotel sheets. She earned less some months and more in others. The market paid her a management share separate from the road fund after Ruth forced the issue at a meeting. You are not volunteer labor, Ruth said. It's my market. Exactly. Mara proposed a number too low. Evelyn crossed it out and wrote a higher one. The producers approved it before Mara could object. The road boxes expanded into a cooperative delivery route. 1 van collected goods on Fridays instead of Mara driving to every farm. Producers took turns. Customers could pick up at the shelter or at 2 stops in town. The change saved fuel and gave Mara back 1 full night of sleep. She discovered that rest did not make her lazy. It made her less likely to put potatoes on lettuce. By the following spring, she had saved enough for a down payment on a small prefabricated cottage. The broad turnout near the shelter allowed room for it without narrowing the road. She placed it behind the pear trees, far enough from the market to hear people arrive, but not every coin entering the cash box. The cottage had 1 bedroom, a shower with unpredictable water pressure, and a kitchen large enough for 2 people who liked each other. Amos built the steps. They tilted. "They're settling," he said. "They were born settled. Ground's uneven. So are the steps." Daniel came down with his level and corrected them, while Amos complained that modern tools had no character. Ellis did not move in by accident. He stood in the new kitchen one evening, holding his chipped toothbrush cup. "I have a drawer here, 4 shirts, 2 pairs of boots, and a key," he said. "You're very observant. I'm asking whether this is where I live." Mara looked around the cottage. The blue mug sat beside the sink. Celia's sewing box rested beneath the window. Ellis's bread starter occupied more counter space than any reasonable organism deserved. "Do you want it to be?" "Yes." "So do I." He put the toothbrush cup beside hers. "That was painfully healthy," he said. "We can argue about cupboard space. I already hate where you put the flour." The old produce shelter stopped being Mara's bedroom and became the market office. She kept Ruth's stained quilt folded in the bottom drawer. The camp stove remained on a shelf even after Ellis called it a fire hazard. Some objects earned retirement without being thrown away. The first harvest supper at the restored shelter was Ruth's idea, which meant everyone else performed it. Tables stretched from the counter to the pear trees. Leon brought potatoes roasted with onions, priced under a system people could finally understand. Evelyn arranged flowers. Amos hung lanterns using wire he claimed had come from a 1948 tractor. Ellis baked bread and a pear cake. Mara made pear butter from the roadside fruit, still imperfectly. People arrived from both directions. They came from farms that supplied the boxes, from town pickup stops, from parcels along the road, and from the Blue Lantern. Cars filled the marked turnout without blocking the lane. The ditches were clear, fresh gravel covered the repaired culvert, and the pear trees leaned above it with their branches thinned for winter. Mara moved between tables checking plates until Ellis caught her wrist. "Sit down. I need to refill the coffee. Patricia has coffee. The bread has survived civilization. I'm hosting, you're hovering." He pulled out a chair beside him. Before Mara could sit, Daniel's truck turned in from the county highway. He parked beyond the last market car and climbed out carrying a covered dish and a paper sack. He had come down from the farm, but he stopped at the edge of the lantern light. People greeted him. Daniel nodded, shifted the dish in his hands, and waited. Mara understood. She walked toward him. "What did you bring?" she asked. "Stew." "Did Ellis supervise?" "No." That was reckless. "And Mom's pear tarts." "I found her old pan." "You made tarts?" They look argumentative. "Family recipe." Daniel glanced at the tables. Their room? There were empty chairs. He could see them. Mara let him ask anyway. "Yes," she said, "there's room." He followed her beneath the shelter roof. Nobody placed him at the head of the table. There was no head. The tables had been pushed together from different sets, uneven in height, joined beneath tablecloths Ruth considered festive. Daniel sat between Amos and Evelyn. Amos immediately challenged him about the spring gravel vote. Evelyn passed him the potatoes before he could answer. Mara took the chair beside Ellis. Halfway through supper, Daniel carried one of the pear tarts to her. Its crust had split, and filling leaked from one side. Argumentative, Mara agreed. He set it between them. They ate from opposite edges. When darkness settled, the lanterns made a long golden line beside the road. Beyond them, Bellwether Farm sat at the top of the hill, smaller than it had been and still standing. Mara could see one barn light through the bare trees. Her parents had left Daniel the place they believed mattered. They had left Mara the way away from it. A truck arrived late, moving carefully across the culvert. Voices rose in greeting as another chair was found. Ellis's hand rested against Mara's beneath the table. Daniel laughed at something Amos said, then shook his head and passed the bread. Mara looked down the road toward the highway, then back toward the farm. For the first time, neither direction felt like escape. She reached for another slice of tart and stayed.